Before we dive into today's journey, have you ever experienced something strange while out camping? Share your story in the comments below, and let's build this haven of eerie campfire tales together. It was the hum that got to me first. Not the kind of sound you notice right away, not something sharp or jarring, just this low, persistent hum beneath the silence, like something was alive when it shouldn't be. And it wasn't until my second night there, tucked deep into a quiet campground on the edge of the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, that I finally admitted it wasn't just in my head. I'd been driving solo across Arizona, taking my old Volkswagen Westfalia through stretches of open desert and shaded pine, chasing some kind of peace after a brutal year. Divorce finalized, job laid off, dad gone. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe stillness. Maybe a place where I wouldn't feel like everything I'd built had already crumbled. I'd pulled into this campground late, too late, really. I remember thinking I should have stayed in Holbrook or just found a rest area for the night, but something about the trees here felt inviting. They were tall, old, and dense. The type of forest that doesn't let light spill too easily. The kind of place that swallows sound. It was almost romantic, in a lonely way. There were only two other campers on the grounds when I arrived. One was an older couple in a compact RV on the far end of the loop. We exchanged nods but never talked. The other, though, the one that stuck with me, was a weathered Class C parked across from the loop where I set up. A white and brown 1980s beast, the kind with the over-cab sleeping area and those wide plastic windows that somehow always look like they're squinting. It was sitting crooked on its tires, curtains drawn, no chairs out, no campfire pit disturbed. But the engine was running, not idling in a loud way, more like a soft, labored wheeze, almost like it was trying to be discreet. But in the dead still of that forest, you hear every unnatural thing. I told myself maybe someone had just pulled in and was running the heater, or maybe they were testing the battery, or using the generator and didn't want to draw from solar. All plausible. All excuses I latched onto fast. Still, something about it made the air feel tight in my lungs. I ate a cold dinner, stretched out in the van with my journal, and tried to lose myself in the silence. I kept looking at that RV through my curtains, expecting someone to step out, but no one ever did. Not that night. The engine finally shut off around midnight. I sat up in my sleeping bag and waited, expecting movement, maybe a figure heading toward the bathhouse or even headlights flicking on. Nothing. Not a door creak, not a flashlight beam, just the sharp snap of pine cones outside and the press of silence settling over the campground. I remember telling myself to sleep, just sleep. But my dreams were fractured. Dark woods, hollow faces, the sound of something breathing too close behind me. When I woke, heart pounding, it was nearly dawn. The RV was still there. But the engine was back on. And once again, no one was outside. I decided to walk by, casually, just a little perimeter stroll before breakfast. I figured if I saw someone, anyone, it'd put my mind at ease. But the closer I got, the more wrong it felt. The windows were completely fogged, but not from inside activity. More like condensation had built up from the outside, thick and greasy like breath on glass. I leaned in just a bit, trying to make out any movement, and that's when I noticed the front windshield had a smear across the inside, like something dragged wet fingers across it in long downward arcs. It wasn't dust. It looked fresher than that, and it wasn't a single handprint. It looked like 4 or 5. Too many. I froze there for a second, just stared, and then I felt this heat behind me. Panic, like someone was standing close, breathing down my neck. I spun around, but the trail was empty. Just a squirrel darting behind a stump. Just trees. Just shadows. I walked back to my van and made coffee with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. It's funny how your mind tries to normalize things. I sat there convincing myself it was just a big family in the RV. Maybe kids messing around. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was projecting my stress, my burnout, my grief onto things that didn't deserve it. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. By the third night, the campground was even emptier. The older couple had packed up and left that afternoon. I watched them go, wishing I'd struck up conversation, and now it was just me and the running RV. Same hum, same eerie rhythmic churn of the engine. I couldn't stop thinking about the condensation on the windows, the hand streaks, the utter stillness of that vehicle. Why wouldn't anyone come out? That night, something changed. Around 3 a.m., I woke with a start. Not from a dream, but from a sound I still struggle to explain. It was a knock, a soft, slow, deliberate knock. On metal, not on my van, not on the bathhouse, on the RV. It came 3 times, then silence. I sat up slowly and peeked through my curtain, hand trembling. The RV was just visible in the moonlight, a dull silver-brown silhouette. But there, near the back, something shifted. A shape. Low to the ground. Crawling. It moved with this strange, jerky rhythm, almost mechanical. Not like an animal. Not even like a person, really. It hugged the shadows along the vehicle's edge, then disappeared around the rear bumper. I held my breath so hard it hurt, and then the engine turned off. Just like that. A sputter, a cough, then silence. The first silence since I'd gotten there. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, the RV was still there. Silent now. No condensation on the windows, no streaks, like it had reset itself. But there were footprints. I saw them. Leading from the rear of the RV toward the woods behind it, bare feet. Small, too small. Like a child's, but only one set. No returning prints, just a trail that vanished into the trees. I don't know what came over me, but I grabbed my thermos and followed them. The trail was barely there, just the vague imprint of small feet pressing into the pine needles, then vanishing where the underbrush thickened. I crouched low, careful not to disturb the prints, which weren't more than 4 or 5, staggered and erratic. They didn't go far, 20 feet maybe, before they disappeared completely behind a fallen log. And just like that, it was gone. Like the forest swallowed whoever made them. I stood there, the air unnaturally still, watching the tree line. I wasn't sure what I expected to see. A child, a shadow, something peering back at me. But there was nothing, just the slow creak of the trees above, whispering with a wind I couldn't feel. I turned back toward camp. That's when I noticed something new. There were drag marks near the base of the RV. Parallel lines in the dirt, like something had been pulled under the chassis. They were shallow, maybe the width of an arm. I stepped closer, crouched, and looked underneath. There was nothing there. Just darkness, gravel, and the empty underbelly of the RV. But I swear, I heard breathing. Not loud, not gasping. Just this steady inhale and exhale, like something was waiting in the crawl space between silence and sound. I stood up so fast I nearly dropped my coffee. Backed away slow, never turning my back until I reached my van. I slammed the sliding door shut and locked it twice. Then I sat there for hours, engine off, holding the keys in my lap, heart pounding like a drum in my throat. That afternoon, someone else pulled in, a young couple in a white Sprinter. I'd never been so relieved to see strangers. They set up about 100 feet away, smiling, waving. I debated warning them. About what, though? That the RV across the lot was haunted? That I heard breathing under the chassis? I didn't want to sound crazy, so I didn't say anything. That night, I left my curtains wide open, watching the RV like it was a wild animal I didn't trust. The couple next to me made dinner over a camp stove, laughing, playing some music low on their speaker. For the first time in 3 nights, the place felt almost normal again, until the engine came back on. At 11:17 a.m. sharp, the same soft rumble, that low choking sound like something mechanical was struggling to breathe. The couple froze mid-conversation. I saw the guy glance at the RV, his brow furrowed. He whispered something to the girl. They both stared. And then the knocking started again. Only this time it was faster. 5 rapid knocks, then 4. Then silence. I opened my van door just a crack, stepping into the chilled night, feeling the wind bite at my skin. The couple was standing outside their van, staring. The guy called out, "Hey, you good over there?" No answer, just the engine humming. And then something flicked on inside, the overhead light. It pulsed. Once, twice, like a heartbeat, then nothing. The guy started walking toward it, slow, cautious. I wanted to scream at him, to stop him, but I didn't. I watched. He circled the front of the RV, knocked on the driver's side window. "Hello?" The engine cut out. Right in the middle of his sentence. He froze. I saw his hand drop. The girl was calling for him now, nervous. "David, come on, let's go." He started backing up. Then the door opened. It was slow, unnaturally slow, like it didn't want to make a sound, but the old hinges creaked anyway. I leaned forward, heart in my mouth. No one stepped out. No one leaned out to say hello or explain or wave, but the engine, still off, started clicking. Not like it was turning over, more like tapping. Rhythmic, sharp clicks, like something metallic under tension. David backed up faster now. Nope, that's messed up. He ran back to his girlfriend. They both got inside their Sprinter and slammed the door, and then it got quiet again. The RV door stayed open all night. I didn't sleep. At 4:22 a.m., I saw movement. A figure, short, hunched, standing in the doorway. Not a child. Not really. Too tall. But the way it moved, it swayed like something was wrong with its legs, or maybe it didn't know how to use them. It clutched the side of the doorway with one hand. The other dangled unnaturally low. It didn't step out, it just stood there, silhouetted, watching me, watching them, watching everything. Then it slowly sank to its knees, collapsed, crawled backward, dragging itself inside the RV like it didn't have bones. The door shut. And that was the last thing I saw. At sunrise, the RV was still there, engine cold, door closed, no movement. I walked over, finally fed up, heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. I knocked on the driver's side. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Hello? You all right in there? Nothing. So I tried the door. It was unlocked. It swung open with a groan. Inside, it was cold, airless, still. The kind of still that creeps into your chest and makes your breath feel wrong. There were no personal belongings, no bedding, no signs of food or clothes or any of the usual clutter of RV life. Just one thing sitting on the cracked vinyl floor, a photograph. I stepped in, against every instinct in my body, and picked it up. It was faded, years old. A family of 4 standing outside that very same RV. Mom, dad, 2 kids, smiling, proud. I turned it over. Someone had written in black ink shakily, "Do not stay past the 3rd night." I dropped the photo like it burned. It landed face down against the grime of the RV floor, and I backed out fast, my feet catching the lip of the door, stumbling down the steps into the dirt. I slammed the door shut behind me with a hollow thunk that echoed too loud for the empty morning. The other couple must have seen me. The guy, David, was outside their van holding a mug of coffee, eyes wide like he knew, like he didn't need to ask what I'd seen. I walked back toward my van, hands shaking. I didn't even look back at the RV. I couldn't. There was something about it. That stillness. Like the air inside wasn't made for lungs, like it held memories that weren't mine, emotions I hadn't lived. I packed up without eating, folded chairs, stowed gear, shut every curtain. I kept glancing at that thing. Not a home, not a shelter, just a hollow metal box that looked like an RV, but felt like a trap, like bait. Before I climbed into the driver's seat, David walked over. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "What's going on with that RV?" he asked. "That wasn't there when we got here, was it?" I hesitated. "It was. Hasn't moved in days. No one's come out." He rubbed his jaw, watching it. "It started running in the middle of the night. No one inside. I swear I saw something. Someone. But it didn't make sense." His voice trailed off. I looked him dead in the eye. "Leave. Don't stay a 4th night." He gave a short nod, like he understood more than he should have. Like maybe this wasn't the first time something had made his instincts flare. I pulled out of the campsite without another word. The RV didn't move, didn't twitch, didn't turn its engine over, but I felt it watching me. Felt the weight of its presence like a pressure against my back all the way down the forest road. I drove until I hit cell service, pulled into a gas station with a laundromat attached, bought a stale sandwich and 2 bottles of water, then sat in the van parking lot, windows down, trying to breathe. I looked up the area, trying to find reports, news, anything. A missing persons alert, a burned down vehicle, even a rumor about a weird camper that never left. Nothing. Not a whisper. I checked Reddit, local forums, obscure paranormal blogs. Still nothing. That's when I realized this wasn't the kind of thing that got documented. This was the kind of thing people forgot, or pretended to. I stared at my hands on the steering wheel. I thought about the photograph, the words scrawled on the back in trembling ink. "Do not stay past the 3rd night." I didn't even know whose handwriting it was. One of the family members? A park ranger? A survivor? That's when I decided to go back. Not to the campsite, no, but to the ranger station 3 miles south off the main highway. If anyone knew the history of that place, it'd be them. When I got there, it looked abandoned. Just one weather-worn building tucked behind a chain-link gate left permanently open. No other cars, no Ranger trucks, just a rusted out maintenance vehicle missing its tires. I knocked. No answer. I opened the door. The bell above the frame jingled with a strange but hollow cheerfulness. Inside, the place was dark, dust in every shaft of sunlight floating like ash. The desk was covered in old maps, radio equipment, a binder labeled Incident Log in faded Sharpie. I opened it. The entries started back in 1994. Most were mundane. Bear sightings, fire warnings, seasonal closures. Then I found one from July 18, 2002. Report of abandoned RV on Loop C, Site 14. Engine running. No visible occupants. Caller said he heard someone talking inside. Arrived on scene, engine off, no one present. Interior cold. Found family photo. Removed vehicle on July 19th, towed to impound. My throat went dry. July 18th, that was exactly 22 years ago to the day I'd found the same RV. I flipped ahead. July 18th, 2007. Same report. Different witness. Different ranger. Same photo found. Again in 2012. Again in 2017. Again in 2022. Every 5 years. Same RV. Same site. Same result. And then my year. 2027. Blank. I stood there, fingers trembling on the edges of the paper. That RV wasn't abandoned. It was returned, replanted, put there like some sick ritual, left like a ticking bomb waiting for someone curious or stupid enough to stay long enough for it to wake up. I flipped to the very front of the binder. Inside the cover in thick red marker was written, "If you see the RV again, do not approach, do not stay, do not try to help." And below it, hastily scribbled in pen, "We tried, it doesn't let them go." I shut the binder, walked out, didn't close the door behind me. That evening, I drove south, fast, through the winding canyons, past towns with no names, until I hit a KOA campground near Flagstaff. It was loud, crowded, kids on bikes, dogs barking, Wi-Fi and neon signs and late-night pizza delivery, and for the first time in days, I could breathe. But even as I laid there in the back of my van, finally beginning to drift off, one thought sank in and settled deep in my bones. It wasn't gone, it just left for now, and 5 years from now, to the day, someone else will find it. And maybe this time, they'll stay too long. I couldn't sleep more than a few hours that night, not even at the KOA, where the hum of air conditioners, the flicker of trailer lights, and the distant drone of the interstate should have made me feel safe, normal, but it didn't. Because every time I closed my eyes, I heard it again. That subtle purring idle, too steady, too deliberate, like the RV wasn't a vehicle at all, but a living thing pretending to be metal. A heartbeat disguised as machinery. A predator pretending to be broken. I left at dawn, not because I had somewhere to be, but because I couldn't be anywhere, still. My body felt like a pressure chamber ready to burst. Something had crawled inside me in that forest, and even now, miles away, it hadn't let go. I thought about the couple I'd met back there, David and his girlfriend. I hadn't seen them leave. I hadn't checked. What if they hadn't left? What if they thought it was all just local lore or a broken down mystery waiting to be solved? What if they stayed past the third night? That thought sat with me all morning. And that's when I did something I told myself I wouldn't. I turned back, not all the way to the loop, just to the nearest gas station north of the forest boundary, the one with the old phone booth and faded trail maps. I needed to see if they'd made it out, if they'd passed this way, bought gas, left a trace. The attendant behind the counter was young, barely 20, reading a graphic novel with a half-smoked vape in one hand. "You seen a blue Volkswagen van pull through here in the last day?" I asked. Couple inside. White guy, brown hair, maybe late 20s. Girl with a sleeve tattoo. He looked up, eyes squinting like he'd just woken up. "Yesterday morning, maybe," he said. "Bought some jerky, water." Said they were heading down into one of the loops. Didn't seem worried. I nodded. "You see them come back?" He paused. "Nope." I left my number. Told him to call me if they showed. But deep down, I already knew he wouldn't. That night, I couldn't drive anymore. I found a cheap roadside rest stop and pulled in, wedged between long-haul trucks and families running late to motel check-ins. I stayed awake with the engine off, every light in the van dimmed. And as I sat in the silence, watching the moonlight stain the empty parking lot silver, I thought about the photo again, that child's face, the parents frozen in some impossible, eternal afternoon that had never ended for them. And I thought about what was written on the back. Do not stay past the third night. It hadn't been a warning. It had been a confession. A desperate whisper scratched down by someone who knew no one would believe them unless they left something behind. That's when it hit me. It's not the RV that stays. It's the people who do. The RV just returns to collect again, to replay its role like an actor stuck in the same scene, waiting for new cast members to arrive, waiting for us to play the same part they did. Maybe that's how it works. Maybe some places don't forget what happened. Maybe they trap it, recycle it, make sure it keeps repeating until someone breaks the loop or joins it. And God help me, I almost joined it. I almost stayed one when I wanted to understand it. I wanted to solve it, name it, tell the world about it. But that's the trap, isn't it? You don't escape these places with answers. You escape by leaving fast, by refusing the story before it finishes writing you into it, by choosing to walk away. And now I'm left with this weight, this itch under the skin that won't go away. I don't tell this story because I think it's over. I tell it because it isn't, because it never is. And maybe someday when you're driving late, tired, chasing some cheap campground to save a few bucks, maybe you'll see it. That older RV, a little out of place, engine purring low like it's been waiting just for you. You might think it's harmless. You might even think it's abandoned. But if you do, if you even think of checking inside, remember this: nothing that empty runs that smooth. And no one leaves a photo like that behind unless they know they're not coming back. So leave, drive away, don't stay past the third night, no matter what, because not everything we camp beside is meant to be found, and not every road leads back the way you came. Some just circle the same moment again and again until it eats you whole. It started with a hum, not from the engine of my VW Westphalia. She was already shut down, quiet for the night, but something deeper, lower, a frequency that didn't belong in the woods. I remember that moment so clearly. I just set my camp chair under the awning, cup of stale gas station coffee in hand, trying to enjoy the stillness of Central Oregon's backcountry. The sun had dipped behind the ridgeline, shadows growing long like arms reaching across the dirt. And then that hum, steady, like it came from the ground itself, began vibrating through the soles of my boots. I told myself it was just tinnitus, or maybe some far-off transformer buried along a forgotten line. But even then, my gut whispered something else. I ignored it. I always do at first. You don't survive solo travel without a little selective disbelief. My name's Trevor. I'm 38. Born and raised in eastern Idaho, where you learn young that the land can kill you faster than any person can. I've been living full-time in my van for the past 3 years, chasing freedom, healing from a few things I don't usually talk about, and filming stories for my YouTube channel. I go where the road pulls me, but sometimes the road pulls wrong. That week, I'd been filming abandoned ranger stations in the Pacific Northwest, old, broken places deep in forested no man's land. I'd gotten a tip about one up near Mackenzie Pass, a collapsed outpost with a fire watch tower, supposedly built during World War II and forgotten. No trails led to it, no GPS coordinates, just a set of directions scribbled on the back of a faded motel receipt by a fellow traveler at a truck stop. Take Forest Ard, Levev 20 past the quarry, left at the rusted gate, follow the logging track till you can't anymore. Park, walk north, 600 steps. It sounded like an adventure. It felt like something I could turn into one of those moody, voiceover-laden videos that people click late at night when they're dreaming of escape. So I followed the receipt like it was gospel. Every turn, every landmark. I ended up parked in a clearing so still, even the mosquitoes seemed reluctant to break the silence. The sky was bruising purple by the time I set up camp. I didn't plan to explore the site until morning. Night hikes are a last resort even for someone like me. There's something about the trees at night that feels wrong. Like they know you're there, like they lean in to listen. But even then, nothing truly felt off yet. Not until the hum started. It wasn't loud, more like a presence than a sound. I could feel it in my jaw, like the air was vibrating in sympathy with something I couldn't see. I stood up, walked a slow circle around the van, flashlight in hand. The woods were just woods, shadowy and vast as expected. No lights, no signs of other campers, not even an owl breaking the silence. But the hum kept pressing at me like it wanted attention. I recorded a voice memo, mostly out of habit. I do that when I get uneasy. Just talk out loud. It's like leaving a breadcrumb trail in case something ever happens to me. Log entry. Tuesday night, about 8:43 p.m., weird vibration in the air. Low frequency, not mechanical, no animals, no movement. Just me, the van, and whatever this is. Don't feel scared yet. Just alert. That was a lie. I already felt the first tremor of fear, like a cold fingertip sliding down my spine. But fear's manageable if you give it structure. That's something I learned after the divorce. After the breakdown, after I lost 3 days wandering off a trail in Utah and had to be airlifted out by search and rescue. You learn to name the things that scare you so they don't eat you whole. But this didn't have a name. By 10 p.m., I was lying in the van, sleeping bag zipped up tight, the hum now part of the background. I still hadn't found the source. I hadn't tried too hard, I didn't want to. The wind had picked up slightly, had to stand whispering through the pines like a language just beyond my comprehension. I watched the shadows dance across the ceiling of the Westie and tried not to imagine shapes forming in the sway. I must have drifted off because I woke up cold. Dead cold. Not the kind of cold where you shiver and curl deeper into the bag. This was emptiness. The kind of cold that wakes you with its silence. I looked at my watch. 3:17 a.m. My flashlight lay on the small shelf above the dash, but I didn't reach for it immediately. Something told me not to move. That's when I noticed it. The hum was gone, replaced by something else. Click, click, click. Soft, almost polite, like someone lightly tapping the van's rear panel. 1, 2, then silence. Click, click, click. I didn't breathe. I waited, counting the spaces between the sounds. 3 seconds. Click, click, click. My flashlight finally found my hand. I turned it on, and the interior of the van bloomed in harsh white. Empty, of course. Just my gear, the road atlas I kept folded on the dash, and a picture of my brother and me stuck to the cabinet with a piece of electrical tape. I held my breath, leaned toward the window. Nothing. Not a single thing outside, but black trees and darkness so thick it looked painted on. Click. This time it came from the passenger side. Click, click. I grabbed the pepper spray from under the seat, threw on my boots, and yanked the side door open. Light spilled out into the clearing and died about 6 feet out. Beyond that, wall-to-wall black. No wind, no bugs, no birds. Just me and the creeping knowledge that I'd made a mistake. Still, I stepped out. Because that's what you do when you camp solo. You don't freeze, you investigate, you rationalize, you tell yourself it's just a squirrel, a branch, a pine cone falling just right. I walked the perimeter of the van, flashlight trembling in my grip. No footprints, no animals, no marks. But as I passed the back of the van, I noticed something strange, subtle. The earth behind the rear tires was disturbed, not like it had been dug up, but sunken. Almost like the soil had been compacted by something heavy. A shape. Squared edges. Perfectly uniform. I knelt, reached out to touch it, and that's when I heard breathing. Close. Too close. Not human. It came from the next segment. I froze. My fingers just inches from the sunken shape in the dirt. The breathing wasn't deep or labored. It was steady, calculated, mechanical even, like a bellows moving through metal lungs. My flashlight beam trembled against the ground, and instinct, more than thought, told me not to lower it, not to check, not to look beneath the van. But instinct only gets you so far when you've built your life on chasing what others run from. So I knelt lower, shifted my weight to the side, and angled the beam under the Westie. Nothing, just shadows at first. Then something moved. Not fast, not aggressive, just shifted, like a ripple across black fabric. But there was no fabric under there, nothing but dirt, gravel, and the van's own undercarriage. Except now I could see the disturbance again. Closer, like a rectangular hatch had been peeled back from the soil itself, and something had slid through it. I staggered up, heart punching the inside of my ribs. I backed toward the driver's side door, eyes never leaving that spot, and flung the door open. Climbed in. Locked it. Not that locks matter much in the woods. I turned the key in the ignition. Engine coughed, wheezed, and sputtered to life. The headlights carved long blades of white through the trees, and for a split second I thought I saw a figure. It wasn't standing. It wasn't walking. It was crouched, squatting like a child in the corner of a classroom, arms wrapped around knees. But it wasn't shaped right. The angles were off, too symmetrical, like it had been drawn by someone who had never seen a real body before. No face, no clothes, just a silhouette against the nearest tree. And then it blinked out. Not ducked, not ran, just wasn't there anymore. I threw the van in reverse so fast I nearly rammed the trunk of a nearby pine. I didn't care. I gunned it out of that clearing, crunching over brush and rock, tires slipping on damp earth. My camera gear was still in the back, the coffee mug shattered on the floor. I didn't care about any of it. I just needed out. But the road wasn't there. I drove straight for 15 minutes, according to the dash clock. I should have been back at Forest Road 1120, but the trees never thinned. The path never widened. Every branch looked like the one before it. Every bend returned me to the same shape of clearing I'd left. It felt like driving through a mirrored loop. My GPS was dead, no signal, of course. Even the compass app on my phone spun lazily, like it was too tired to lie. Then the hum returned, stronger, louder, and now it wasn't just sound, it was pressure, like the atmosphere was being squeezed through a funnel, thickening around the van. The engine started whining in second gear. The wheel tugged left. I had to fight just to keep it on what I thought was the trail. I came around one last bend and saw it. A building. Gray industrial, windowless. Just there, squatting among the trees like it had been waiting for someone to find it. I slammed the brakes, the van shuddering to a stop, dust rolling over the hood. It didn't make sense. There was no reason for a structure like that to be in the middle of this forest. It wasn't a ranger station, wasn't a fire watch cabin. No signs, no fencing, just concrete walls and a single metal door, sunken slightly like it had been swallowed by the ground over time. And above it, the trees bent away, like they didn't want to touch it. I should have driven away, backed up, pushed through the trail until I found real road again. But that hum was louder here, almost behind my ears, like it was inside me now, buzzing between my ribs, vibrating the fillings in my teeth, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I felt like I needed to go inside. Not wanted to, needed to, like something had already decided I was going to. I left the engine running, grabbed my flashlight again, approached the structure slowly, boots crunching over frostbitten pine needles. The door was slightly ajar, no handle on the outside, just a push plate. Stainless steel, smeared with dirt. No markings. I pushed it. The door swung inward, soundlessly. Darkness inside, but not total. A faint glow deeper within, like fluorescence on backup power. Flickering. I stepped in, and the door closed behind me without a sound. The hum stopped. Gone. And for the first time in hours, silence returned. So absolute, I could hear the blood in my ears. The air inside was cooler than outside. Stale. No rot, no mildew, just blank. Like nothing had ever breathed here. The hallway stretched ahead, square, sterile, walls the color of cigarette ash, pipes overhead, no dust, no decay, and yet no sign of recent life either, like a bunker sealed too well for time to touch it. I took a few steps forward. My boots echoed sharply. The hallway was longer than it looked, unnaturally so. Each step seemed to stretch it more, not less. That's when the door behind me vanished. I spun. Gone. Wall. No seam, no hinges, just smooth concrete. I touched it, pounded with my fist, solid. And then, low and sudden, the hum started again. But not from the walls, from within me, my chest, my throat. The flashlight flickered once, twice. Then the light held and the hallway in front of me had changed. No longer straight, now a four-way intersection. 4 identical corridors, each with the same walls, same light, same distant flicker at the end. I turned in place, heart now pounding like a war drum. I wasn't alone in here, I knew it, I could feel it. Not behind me, not watching, waiting. My throat tightened as I turned in a slow circle. The flashlight gripped so hard in my hand it made my knuckles burn. 4 hallways, same structure, same flickering lights, same gut-wringing pressure behind the ribs. I didn't remember walking that far. I didn't remember this place shifting, but I also didn't remember a door behind me disappearing into solid concrete. I picked the hallway to my right, not for any reason, just instinct. Like maybe I had a better chance if I committed to one direction, kept moving, didn't stop. I counted steps. 42 before the flickering light overhead steadied again, glowing a sickly yellow. The concrete around me didn't change, but it felt narrower. My shoulders brushed the walls now, even though the corridor hadn't physically shrunk. It was all in perception. I knew that. Still, it made my breathing shallow. A low vibration ran through the soles of my boots. Not quite an earthquake, more like a generator switching on somewhere beneath the ground. The hum had a pulse now, a rhythm, like breath. I glanced behind me. The hallway was still there, except now it wasn't empty. A figure stood at the far end, slender, wrong proportions, arms slightly too long, just standing there, hands at its sides, not moving, not blinking. The flashlight flickered again, and when it returned, the figure was closer. 10 feet closer. I didn't scream, didn't bolt. I just walked, faster, straight ahead. Didn't turn back again. This was why I camped solo, because no one else would believe this. And even if they did, they'd want to turn around, figure it out, find explanations. But explanations didn't belong here. Not anymore. The hallway curved. Another impossible shift. Hallways don't curve inside cement bunkers. But this one did. It bent left, then dipped downward like a spiral ramp descending into the earth. The air got heavier. The lights dimmed. Then I smelled it. Plastic. Burned plastic and warm wires, like an old CRT television left on too long. It tugged something old from my memory, my grandfather's garage, the smell of solder and melting insulation. Except here it had weight, like the scent was pressing down on my shoulders. The spiral led me to a door. Steel this time, wide, industrial, like something off a submarine, no handle, just a circular window at head height, fogged over. I stepped up to it, wiped the glass with my sleeve. Beyond it, a massive chamber, and something inside. A room full of doors. Hundreds, maybe thousands of identical gray doors stretching out in every direction like a storage facility that had been folded in on itself, each one labeled with stenciled numbers, no two repeated. The floor wasn't concrete anymore, but black and white checkered tiles, like an abandoned diner or dream logic run wild. But it wasn't the doors that stopped me cold. It was the camera, mounted above one of the doors, following me. No wire connected it to anything. It turned slightly, deliberately, tracking. I backed away from the window, and the steel door hissed open. A suction of air pulled outward like the room beyond had been sealed tight for decades. The air was hotter here, dry. My mouth instantly felt like I'd been chewing cotton. I should have turned back, but I stepped through, and the door slammed shut behind me. No sound. No echo, just that same nauseating silence. I moved toward the nearest door, stenciled with the number 5349, and touched the handle. Cold, smooth, no vibration, but as soon as I grabbed it, I heard something behind me. Footsteps, not soft, heavy, boots, rhythmic, deliberate. I turned. Nothing, but the sound didn't stop. I backed into the space between doors. The tile under my boots felt oddly soft now, like walking on linoleum over sponge. I crouched, shining my light down the far row, and I saw it again. Not the figure this time, a shadow, moving independently of any light source. It slid along the floor, twisting, reaching, looking for shape. I clenched the flashlight, ready to bolt. Then the door behind me opened, not by me, not by force, just creaked open slowly, like it had been waiting for me to listen. A room lay beyond, no walls, just blackness and the sound of rain. I stepped inside. Instantly, my feet sank into cold mud. Trees. There were trees again. I was standing in the middle of a forest clearing, except not my forest. This one was artificial. I don't mean fake. These were real trees, real branches, real moss. But everything about them felt arranged, like a film set. The rain wasn't falling from a sky. It was falling from a grated ceiling, like a sprinkler system above. The forest wasn't real. It was a room built to look like one. I spun slowly and saw the sky. Painted. Just a vast ceiling painted with clouds and mist, with soft moving lights behind it to mimic moonlight. Someone, somewhere, had recreated an entire outdoor scene underground. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that there was another van in the clearing, identical to mine. Same teal Westphalia, same sun-faded bumper sticker, same little dent above the passenger side headlight. I walked to it in a daze, touched the handle. It was unlocked. I opened the sliding door. Inside was a mess. Coffee mug on the floor, sleeping bag rumpled, my old boots tossed to the side, and a phone on the dashboard. My phone. But I had mine in my back pocket. I turned around, every hair on my arm standing straight. From the trees across the clearing, I heard something whisper my name. Soft. Perfect. My own voice. I froze. Not just from fear, but from recognition. That voice, it wasn't just mimicking me, it was me. Down to the rasp I get after drinking too much coffee, the slightly nasal ring from allergies I've had since childhood. I stepped back from the van, scanning the painted trees. Another whisper. Jason. Clearer this time. It was coming from behind one of the trees. The shape of the trunk was oddly square, too perfect. The bark texture looked printed, not grown. But something stood just beyond it, hidden in the artificial shadows. I edged back toward the van and yanked the driver's side door open. The keys were still in the ignition. Not mine. These were older, worn nearly smooth. I turned them anyway. Nothing. Not even a click. Dead engine. No dashboard lights. The whisper came again, this time closer, more insistent. I shut the door, not slamming it but pressing it shut gently. I didn't want to make noise, and that's when I noticed something new in the van. On the passenger seat sat a stack of Polaroids, old ones, curled at the edges. My stomach dropped as I lifted the top one. It was me, standing at my current campsite, the one outside the radio tower, taken from the trees. Another, me again, sitting by the fire, looking over my shoulder like I'd heard something. Another, I was sleeping, curled up in my sleeping bag, the flap of the van door barely open. None of these I'd taken. No one was supposed to know where I'd camped. I flipped to the last photo. It wasn't of me, it was the figure I'd seen in the hallway. Closer now. Its face was blurred, not by motion, blurred like it didn't have a face to focus on, just a white space where one should be. And behind it in the picture was this very same forest room. I dropped the stack. A whimper escaped me before I could swallow it. The voice came again, only now it was beside me. Jason. I lunged for the van door, but before I could reach it, the windows turned pitch black, like the outside world just shut off. No light, no scene, no reflection. And a moment later, the door I had entered through, the steel one, creaked open again in the distance. Flickering lights spilled through it, casting jagged, moving shadows along the fake forest floor. Whatever had called my name, it wasn't following. It didn't need to. It had already watched. I sprinted. Didn't care about mud, didn't care about noise, didn't even look back. I ran toward the light, pushing through plastic branches and weirdly rubbery undergrowth. I made it back into the tiled chamber of doors, skidding across the floor on my knees. The door slammed behind me. Hard, louder than before. I didn't even catch my breath. I just ran. Past doors, past the watching camera, back toward the spiral hallway, back to the humming, back to whatever passed for real in this place. But when I reached the spiral ramp, it was gone. The hallway just ended in a wall, and behind me I heard the doors begin to open, softly, one by one, like something had decided it was time to release what lived inside them. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I turned and started walking toward the far wall, flashlight held like a weapon, heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to get out. I pressed my hand against the wall, cold, unyielding. But as I pushed, the concrete gave way. It didn't crumble, it didn't creak. It simply yielded like warm memory foam. And I stepped into another hallway. But this one looked familiar. Cinder blocks. A blue sign overhead that read storage access, and beneath it, a red exit sign. Dim, flickering, but real. Or at least it looked real. I moved toward it, slowly. Breathing through my nose, counting every step like a ritual to keep my sanity stitched together. Then I saw it. The hatch, in the floor. The one I'd crawled through to get in here. It was open now. The ladder extended. A beam of sunlight, real sunlight, poured through it. I didn't wait. I climbed. My legs shook, my boots slipped twice, but I didn't fall. I pulled myself up and out into the real wind-scented air, the real sky, the crackling fire that had long since burned out beside my van. I didn't close the hatch, didn't even look back. I got into my van, turned the key, and this time the engine roared to life like it had missed me. The radio burst to life too, blaring static and then a country station, loud and jarring in the morning silence. I didn't turn it down. I just drove. Straight out of that clearing. No food, no packing, just me and the road. I didn't stop for 3 hours, not until I hit a town with people and noise and streetlights. That night I parked in a motel parking lot and locked every door. I checked the windows a dozen times before I slept. And even then, I dreamed of endless gray hallways and doors that opened themselves. But the worst part? was when I woke up the next morning and found a photo tucked under my windshield wiper, a Polaroid of me sleeping in that motel bed. I didn't scream, didn't run, didn't even touch the photo. I just stood there in that motel parking lot, heart thudding so loud I couldn't hear the passing cars. The photo bent slightly in the morning wind, curling toward me like it wanted to be held, like it had something to whisper. But I wouldn't touch it. Not again. I'd learned something in those back rooms, in those plastic forests and impossible doors. Sometimes, the moment you acknowledge something, that's when it latches on. So I backed away, left the photo right there under the wiper, got in the van and started driving again. Didn't know where I was headed. Didn't matter. I just needed distance, time, clarity. But as the miles stretched out behind me, I couldn't shake the sensation that I wasn't just being watched. I was being studied, like a lab rat in a maze, spinning in circles, tested to see which door I'd choose next. And every wrong turn, every suspicion ignored, every instinct pushed down. That's when the world would shift just slightly off axis. Every abandoned tower, every strange knock, every time I didn't listen to my gut. That's when the hallways grew longer. That's when the lights hummed louder. That's when the rules of the world bent. It wasn't a place I had entered. It was a system, a pattern, a test. And the more I tried to forget it, the more I noticed it happening again. Not as loud this time, not as jarring, but there in the subtle moments. A gas station that didn't show up on GPS. A forest road that wasn't there last week. A radio signal repeating coordinates I didn't recognize. Once a man in a brown park ranger uniform waved me down just before sunset. I slowed, but something about his smile didn't move right. Like the muscles had been arranged by someone who had read about human faces but never actually seen one. I kept driving, watched in my mirror as he kept waving, that strange fixed smile never changing, not once. That night, I didn't sleep, didn't camp. I parked in the middle of a crowded Walmart lot between RVs and idling trucks and left the engine running. But even there, at 2:17 a.m., I swear I heard something knock from inside the walls of the van, not outside. 3 slow, hollow knocks, right behind the kitchen sink panel. I didn't open it, didn't move until dawn. And in the days that followed, I started writing things down, every strange detail, every repeated pattern. I stopped trying to find rational explanations. Because that's the trap, isn't it? That's how it gets you. You try to make sense of the senseless, stitch the impossible into a framework your brain can understand. And while you're busy doing that, it's changing the walls around you. But there was something else I started doing too. Something that helped more than I expected. I started talking to other RVers, quiet ones. The kind who keep journals, park off-grid, know how to read wind and tree shadows better than a map. And that's when I found them. Others who had seen the rooms. They called them different things. The hollow, the fifth side, the maze that bleeds. One guy in Montana just called it them corridors. He wouldn't say more. Just shook his head and showed me the same Polaroid I'd gotten, his version of it. But in his, he wasn't sleeping. He was screaming, and the background wasn't the motel room or the forest or his RV. It was a hallway. Dim, yellow, just like mine. And just like that, I knew it wasn't just me. These weren't random nightmares. They were intersections. Places where the world we know thins just enough for something else to slip through. Not ghosts, not aliens. Something older and more patient. Something that doesn't haunt you like a horror movie. It invites you, tests you, and if you fail, you never know you did. You just stay. Wandering through fake forests, sleeping in looping hallways, listening to a version of your own voice echo through the dark. But if you survive, if you learn to listen, if you learn the rules, you get out. Scarred, unsettled, changed, but out. And you take something with you, not a souvenir, not a memory, a responsibility. To notice when the seams of the world start to fray. To know when the gas station shouldn't be there. To trust your gut when a voice calls your name from the dark. And you know damn well it's not yours. To stop pretending you're crazy when the air feels too quiet or the door you just walked through is suddenly gone. That's the real lesson. Not fear, not avoidance, awareness. Because if you listen closely, even right now, there's still a hum behind the silence. Still a hallway you haven't noticed before. Still a door that's waiting. And when it opens, You better know who you are. You better remember where you came from, because if you don't, you'll get lost in the back rooms too, and you won't even know you're gone. Not really, but I'm still here, and if you're hearing this, then maybe you are too. So keep your map close, trust your instincts, and never ever answer your own voice when it calls to you from the woods. Because once you do, you're not alone anymore, and you might not be you for long. I should have trusted the wind, not the forecast, not the app on my phone, not the ranger's warning on the bulletin board. I should have trusted the way the wind, low, crawling, whispering around my VW like it had something to say. The kind of wind that doesn't just pass through grass, but drags itself through it like a wounded thing. I ignored it. I rationalized it. And by the time I realized something was wrong out there on the plains, I wasn't just isolated. I was being watched. It started like any other trip. I'd been on the road 6 weeks, chasing quiet, trying to get distance from the noise of home, the stress of everything that wasn't working. My name's Alex. I'm 34 from Flagstaff, Arizona. I just finished a long project that fell apart at the last minute, and instead of picking up the pieces back home, I figured I'd just disappear for a while. I loaded up my Volkswagen Westfalia, my '89 rust-patched, soul-saving second home, and aimed it toward open country. People talk about the Great Plains like they're boring, flat, empty, corn and clouds and nothing in between. But that's not what I found. What I found was a landscape that's too empty, a silence too heavy. I had never felt small in the mountains or lost in the desert, but somewhere between central Nebraska and western Kansas, I felt like I'd left the map behind. Not physically. My GPS still showed roads, but emotionally. Like the land didn't care I was there, like maybe it didn't even want me there. It was late September when I found this campground. Not one of the big ones, not a KOA or national park pull-in. Just a stretch of prairie tucked between some ranch land and a low hill with a weather-worn wooden sign that read Tuttle Grove Primitive Camping. It was free, no hookups, no amenities. But the views, my God, the views were unreal. Golden fields that shimmered under the sunset, a vast sky that changed moods like a living thing. I parked the van by a gnarled cottonwood tree, the only one for what felt like miles, and cracked open a beer. The wind that night felt strange. Not cold, just unsettled. It kept shifting directions in these sharp, abrupt gusts, like something was pacing out there in the dark. I remember stepping out after dinner, stretching my legs, and hearing something distant, like a rustling, but not the natural kind. More rhythmic, more deliberate. But I was alone, and I figured it was just the tall grass playing tricks. You lie to yourself out there. When you're that far from town, with no one for miles, you tell yourself all kinds of things to keep calm. That the movement you saw was just a deer. That the sound wasn't footsteps, it was your imagination. That the van's sliding door didn't just click open on its own. I woke up at 2:11 a.m. The time stuck with me. My phone buzzed for a second like it was trying to reconnect to something, then went dead. No signal, no Wi-Fi. I sat up in bed and felt it immediately. A pressure. Not outside, but inside the van. Like someone was holding their breath just out of sight. I turned on my flashlight. Nothing. Nobody. But the sliding door, the one I swore I'd locked, was cracked open about 2 inches. That moment, my heart didn't just pound, it went still. Flatline. For one long, terrifying second, I didn't move. I didn't breathe, because every instinct screamed that someone had opened it. Not something. Someone. But when I yanked it open and shined my light out into the night, there was nothing there. Just swaying grass and that wind. I stayed up the rest of the night, paranoid. Every time the wind brushed against the van, I jumped. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe I'd forgotten to lock the door, maybe the latch was faulty, maybe the whole thing was just leftover stress from the project I'd tried to forget. I almost believed it until I found the footprints. They weren't boot prints, not sneakers. They were bare feet in the soft dirt outside my van, just two. Facing the door, no other prints around, no trail in, no trail out, like someone had just appeared there and stood, watching. My body went cold, that kind of deep cold that has nothing to do with temperature. I scanned the field, the trees, the hilltop beyond the grass, nothing, but the silence felt heavier, like something was withholding noise, no birds, no bugs, just that slow, circling wind and the pounding of my heart. I almost left right then, almost packed up and drove out in my pajamas. But that's the thing about solo camping. You always doubt yourself first. You question your own fear, your sanity. You try to be rational. I mean, what kind of person appears barefoot in the middle of the prairie, says nothing, leaves no trail, and walks off without a sound? I told myself it must have been an animal. I told myself I'd imagined the shape of the prints. That night I locked every door, wedged a hiking pole through the handles, and slept with my multi-tool under my pillow. And I told myself if anything happened again, I'd leave. And something did. The second night, I tried to stay up. I sat outside in my camp chair until the stars came out. Beautiful, endless stars, more than I'd ever seen before. But I couldn't enjoy them. I kept checking over my shoulder. The grass out there moves constantly, like it's always whispering secrets. I swear I kept hearing it say something. Not a word, but a pattern, a shape, a rhythm. I went back inside the van by 11, locked everything, slept in my clothes. At 3:19 a.m. I heard it. 3 knocks. Not on the door, not the window, on the roof. Just 3. Not loud, but deliberate. Spaced apart like a code, I bolted upright. The van didn't rock. Nothing moved. But those knocks, they echoed down my spine like a warning. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat there, frozen, flashlight in hand, staring at the ceiling. It took everything in me not to scream. And then, nothing. No follow-up. No sound. No movement. Just silence. I climbed up slowly, pushing my head through the pop-top canvas. I didn't know what I expected to see. Maybe an animal, maybe damage. But the roof was clean, dry, empty. Except the very back corner, 2 handprints. Small. Human. Pressed into the dust. The prints were too small for a man, too wide for a child. They looked fresh, like someone had crawled up there, barehanded, and crouched, watching through the pop-top while I slept. I reached out, touched the dusty smears, and felt the panic rise like nausea. They were still warm. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. At dawn, I broke camp, threw everything back into the van, didn't bother reorganizing. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my camp stove twice. I told myself I'd head to the next town over, get coffee, reset, figure out a new place to stay. But as I pulled out of Tuttle Grove and got back onto the county road, I saw something that made me slam on the brakes. At the crest of the hill, the one I'd looked at both nights, always feeling watched, I saw a figure standing in the waist-high grass. Just standing, still, arms at their side, long hair, barefoot. I blinked, looked again, and they were gone. Just gone. No movement, no rustle, no trace. I should have turned around right then, should have gone back to town, found other campers, anything. But something weird took hold of me. Not bravery, not stubbornness, something more like obsession. I had to understand what I saw. I had to know if I was losing my mind. And deep down, I think I knew that running wouldn't fix anything. Because whatever this was, it had noticed me. I didn't head back to town. I found another site. It wasn't far, maybe 30 miles west, just across the state line into Kansas. I'd remembered a spot I saw on a forum a few weeks back, another free site called Lost Mule Draw. Weird name. But it had a good review from someone who liked quiet places, off-grid. That's what I wanted. Stillness, a place to think, to shake the fear out of my bones. It was smaller than Tuttle Grove. No trees this time, just low ridgelines and grass that stretched like waves. When the wind moved, it shimmered like water. I parked the van in a depression between 2 hills, hoping the natural barrier would make me feel safer. No open ridge for things to stand on, no trees to hide behind. I set up camp again, but I couldn't shake the feeling. It followed me. That first night in Lost Mule Draw, I didn't cook. Didn't turn on music. I sat inside the van with all the curtains drawn and the lights dimmed, listening. That wind again. Always the wind. At 1:47 a.m., I heard something new. Not knocking, not footsteps, a voice. It was faint, like it was being carried on the wind, but I know what I heard. It said my name. Once, just once. I froze. I held my breath so long my chest ached. Then I heard it again, closer. Alex. Not a scream. Not a whisper, something between, like it came from a dry throat, trying to remember how to speak. It wasn't aggressive. That made it worse. It sounded curious. I grabbed my flashlight, flung open the side door, and shined the beam into the grass. Nothing. Just open field and the edge of the hill. But the air felt wrong. Heavy. Electric. I backed into the van, locked up again, and sat on the floor until sunrise. I didn't even want to be in the bed anymore. I didn't want to be near the canvas top, near the roof. I felt too vulnerable, exposed. And the next morning, there was a new detail waiting for me. On the rear window, written in condensation, were 4 words: "Shh, you came back." Why? The letters were smeared like they'd been written by a fingertip. I touched the window, still damp from the night air. But what chilled me wasn't just the message. It was that I never told anyone I'd been there before. That's when the dream started. I stopped sleeping for more than 20 minutes at a time. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see shapes in the grass, faces without features. I'd hear the wind whispering my name, see hands pulling at the edges of the van. The worst part was that in those dreams, I was never scared. I just watched, like I was waiting for something. And when I woke up, I'd sometimes find myself sitting up, staring out the window, like I'd been doing it for hours. Like something called to me while I slept, and I answered without even knowing it. The third night, I hit my breaking point. At 3:06 a.m., I woke up to music. Not my music. An old country tune, warped and slow, like it was playing on a distant radio with bad reception. But the song was familiar. It was one my dad used to play when I was a kid. A song I hadn't heard in years. I climbed out of bed, barefoot, barely aware of what I was doing. I followed the sound outside into the field. The van's lights were off. Everything was pitch black except the stars. The song kept playing. I walked toward the hilltop. I don't know how far I got. I don't even remember walking. One second I was near the van. The next I was standing at the edge of the ridge, staring into a vast field that looked darker than it should have. Not just shadowed, but wrong, like the land stopped being land. And then I saw them. Figures in the field, just standing there. 10, maybe 12 of them. Barefoot, long hair, thin, watching me. And as I stared, frozen, the music stopped, all at once. No fade out, no glitch, just silence. And that's when they moved, not toward me, but with me. As I backed away, they did too. Perfectly mirrored, like they were tethered to me. I turned. They turned. I raised a hand. So did they. I ran. I don't know how I made it back to the van, but I flung myself inside, started the engine without thinking, and floored it down the dirt road, windshield smeared with dust, heart hammering. I didn't look back. Not until daylight. I drove until the sky turned blue again, until the grass disappeared behind long, flat stretches of gravel and telephone poles, until the sun finally touched my hands on the steering wheel and made me feel like I still belonged in the world. But even with all that distance, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. Not physically. Not in the way you'd expect. More like it had attached itself to me. In the air I breathed. In the way the shadows shifted even under the sun. That morning I pulled into a truck stop somewhere outside Dodge City. The kind with 2 gas pumps, a diner, and a parking lot where dust curls up from the tires like smoke. I must have looked like hell. I hadn't showered in days. My face was raw from anxiety, and I kept flinching at the sound of wind slapping the flagpole. I went inside, ordered black coffee and a stack of pancakes just to sit with something warm in front of me. I needed to feel normal. But even then, I noticed the stares. The waitress asked if I'd come from Lost Mule Draw, and when I hesitated too long, she just nodded slowly like she already knew. "You're not the first one to roll in here from that place," she said, pouring my second cup without asking. "What do you mean?" She glanced at the cook, then back to me. Her voice dropped. "Folks go out there for the quiet, but quiet's not always empty." I didn't respond. She leaned closer. "They say there was a house out there, a long time ago. Family lived off-grid, self-sufficient, no real records, had their own way of doing things." I felt the knot in my stomach return. What happened to them? No one really knows. They just vanished. One winter, snow came early. When spring hit, some ranchers found the place abandoned. Food on the table, tools still outside, doors wide open, like they'd all just walked out into the field and never came back. I didn't know what to say. It sounded like every campfire ghost story I'd ever heard, but it matched the unease, the things I saw, the feeling that had gnawed at me since I pulled into that draw. She poured again, then added, "You're lucky. Whatever it is that lives out there, it don't let most people leave with their minds intact." That night, I tried sleeping in a rest stop. but I couldn't close my eyes. Not fully. My body wouldn't let me. Every time I started drifting off, I'd hear something. Soft footsteps across gravel, a distant hum of music, or worse, nothing at all. Nothing is more terrifying than silence when you're used to being haunted by sound. I pushed further west, into Colorado, hoping elevation would clear my head. I needed air that hadn't passed through whatever valley of dread that place had carved into the plains. I needed to believe that fear didn't cling to you like scent. I found a site near Comanche National Grassland, quiet, public. I parked near other campers for the first time in days. It felt safer, even if I didn't speak to them. Just knowing there were other headlights nearby made the world feel sane again. But the thing about trauma, about real fear, is that it never really leaves. It lives inside you like a second heart, and it keeps beating, even when you're pretending everything's fine. I'd wake up each night at the same time, 3 to 6 a.m. I'd feel watched, even with no one around, even with no ridge for shadows to gather. One night, I opened the back of the van and found a small bundle tied together with dry grass. Inside were smooth stones painted with faded symbols, unfamiliar but eerily symmetrical, left in the center of my rear bumper like an offering or a warning. I drove again and again, trying to outrun a thing that wasn't bound by roads or maps. Eventually, I made it to Wyoming, parked on BLM land so wide open you could see headlights coming from 30 miles off. That helped a little. I needed space. I needed to see the horizon again. And one evening, just before sunset, I decided to do something different. I didn't hide. I sat outside, built a fire, let the flames warm my face and crackle into the growing dark, and I spoke, out loud, to the wind, to whatever might be listening. I don't know what you are, I said. I don't know what you want from me, but I saw you. I know you're there. I'm not pretending anymore. The fire flared, no wind, no fuel change, just a sudden, sharp rise in flame, a warning or an answer. But I didn't flinch. I stayed, and for the first time since I left Tuttle Grove, I felt something shift. Not disappear, not leave, but shift. Like acknowledgement, like respect, or maybe permission to carry on. I still see things sometimes, reflections that linger too long, shadows that move against the grain of light, dreams I can't quite shake. But I've made peace with it, or tried to. Not everything in the wild wants to harm you, but not everything wants to let you leave unchanged. The Great Plains aren't just wind and grass and empty sky. They're a membrane, thin and stretched between the seen and unseen. And sometimes when you step too far into silence, you tear through. And what looks back? Sometimes it just wants to be noticed. Sometimes it remembers you. I stayed on the road. Not because I was running anymore, but because I was listening now, watching, letting the silence speak instead of fearing it. The thing about camping in a Volkswagen out here, across the Great Plains, the Dakotas, the endless stretch of ghost-colored sky, is that it changes you. Not in the way some cheesy brochure might claim, not find yourself or escape the 9 to 5. I'm talking about real change, the kind that scrapes your nerves raw, the kind that makes you question if your thoughts are even your own, or just echoes from a place that never truly forgets anyone who passes through it. Somewhere between Nebraska's rolling sandhills and the edges of Kansas wheat fields, I stopped trying to be who I was before Lost Mule Draw, before the old melody hummed in the trees, before the thing in the dark leaned against the skin of my world and pressed. I started keeping a journal. Not for answers, but for honesty. I wrote about the cold that came even when the sun was high, the way my dog had stopped barking one night in Wyoming and just watched the open prairie like something massive and invisible had just passed by. I wrote about how I couldn't keep mirrors in the van anymore. They always caught things that shouldn't be there, half-seen faces, split-second movements behind my shoulder. I threw them all out by the time I reached Montana. One night I camped near Medicine Bow and a storm rolled in. Not a big one, but enough to rattle the van and beat the roof like drumsticks. I should have moved, should have left before the dirt road washed out. But I didn't. I wanted to see if the fear still held me the same way it did back in that ravine. And you know what? It didn't. I was afraid. Sure, the sky broke like glass and the thunder sounded like it was chewing on my bones. But beneath that fear, something else stirred. Strength. Because once you've survived something that rewrites your soul, no storm can take that from you. When the rain cleared, I stepped out barefoot into the mud. The entire field sparkled under the moonlight. Silver puddles, wet sage, wind moving in wide, breathing circles. I stood there and let it in. Not just the fear, the whole of it. The lesson. See, when you camp out here in places no one talks about, on land that doesn't care if you live or vanish, you learn something that changes everything. Nature doesn't want your comfort. It doesn't owe you peace, but it will show you the truth. And truth is terrifying because it strips away the stories you tell yourself about safety, about control, about what is and isn't possible. After that storm, I started noticing how many other campers lived like ghosts. People parked 10 miles out from anyone else, faces pale from solitude, eyes watching you like they've seen too much. Most don't talk, but some do. Some open up like their soul's been waiting years to spill. And the things they say, they match what I saw, what I felt. Voices that don't belong in wind, animals that circle your van but never leave prints. Time that stops working the way it should. Minutes that stretch, nights that repeat. Dreams that follow you even after you wake. None of us say the word haunted. That's too small. Too cheap. What lives out here, what hides between cornfields and dry ravines and old abandoned grain silos, it's deeper than ghosts. It's memory. The land remembers. And if you listen close enough, if you sleep in the quiet long enough, you'll feel it remembering you. But here's the part most people don't get. The part that matters more than all the fear. You're allowed to remember it back. To stand in the middle of that vast, empty world and say, I was here, I lived through it, and I'm still driving. That's what the Volkswagen became for me. Not just a vehicle, not just a shelter, but a symbol, a moving confession, a kind of offering to the road to say, I'm not hiding from the dark anymore. I carry it with me. I've learned to live beside it. I still drive through the Great Plains sometimes. Not often, not recklessly, but with purpose. To remind myself that I survived something most people wouldn't believe. That I came out the other side with eyes that see deeper, skin that feels the air shift before it turns cold. And when I meet other travelers, those weathered faces in the rearview mirror or around a campfire with more silence than stories, we don't need to say much. Just a nod. Just a look. We know. We've all met the plains in their truest form, and we chose to keep going anyway. So if you're listening to this, wondering whether you're ready to explore the forgotten corners, the empty windswept stretches, the places not marked on any map, ask yourself something. Are you ready to be changed? Because out there, beyond the signal and the grocery stores and the paved campgrounds, the land is waiting. Not to welcome you, but to meet you. And once it does, you'll never be the same again. So drive carefully, sleep lightly, and when the wind sings at night, don't be so quick to shut your eyes. Sometimes it's not singing to scare you. Sometimes it's just reminding you, you're not alone out there. You never were. I hadn't planned to end up in the Smokies. Not really. I was supposed to loop down through Chattanooga, skirt Asheville, maybe wander up toward Shenandoah. But there's something about the Appalachians that gets inside you. It's not just the beauty, it's heavier than that. It feels like the land remembers things, holds them. I'd been on the road in my old Volkswagen Westphalia for 6 weeks by then. She rattled and moaned on the steeper grades, but I'd done enough repair work to trust her, mostly. My plan that morning was to find an off-grid RV campsite tucked somewhere on the North Carolina side of the Smokies, where I could sleep without generators humming nearby. Just me, the trees, the air, and whatever the hell else the woods decided to reveal. The campsite I found wasn't listed on any of the usual forums. No GPS marker, no reviews. Just a local I met at a gas station. An older man with weathered skin and nicotine-stained fingertips who told me, there's an old spot near Nolan Creek. Used to be an RV loop back in the 60s. Long since closed, but you can still get in if the road ain't washed out. I don't know why I trusted him. Maybe it was the way he said it, almost like a warning wrapped in an invitation. Or maybe I was just tired of all the safe places. I wanted something real, untouched. I followed his directions, turned off the main road near Bryson City, and drove for nearly 2 miles on a cracked blacktop that had no business still existing. Tree roots had buckled sections like broken bones, and green moss spilled over the edges like the forest was trying to reclaim it. Eventually, it narrowed into dirt and then gravel. I kept waiting for the road to end or for some faded no trespassing sign to push me back, but it never came. And then, just before dusk, the trees parted. I rolled into a clearing, wide and quiet, ringed by heavy oaks and skeletal pines. You could tell this place had once been laid out with intention. Faint gravel circles outlined where RVs might have parked 50 years ago. A rusted metal post stood at the entrance, no sign atop it now. Just two corroded bolts, like empty eye sockets. There was no one there, no wildlife, not even birdsong. I parked near the edge, where the trees pressed in, shut off the engine. The silence dropped like a blanket, and still I didn't feel scared. Not yet. I felt watched, sure, but not threatened. Not in a way I could name. That first night I made a small fire from fallen branches and ate canned chili straight from the tin. The night air smelled wet, not from rain, but like something living just below the surface. Mushrooms, maybe, or rot. I kept looking at the tree line, half expecting someone to emerge, but the forest stayed still. The only odd thing, and it didn't even register until later, was how quiet my thoughts were. Normally when I camp alone, I feel the churn of the day for a while. My mind loops, memories, tasks, regrets. But here, it was like something muted the inside of my skull, as if the place didn't want me thinking too loud. I slept hard that night, unnaturally hard. Woke up just after sunrise with a film of sweat over my skin. Even though it was cool outside, my sleeping bag felt damp, like I'd been fever dreaming all night. I couldn't remember any of it. I stepped out of the van and immediately noticed the birds were back. A few warblers in the canopy, a woodpecker far off. That put me at ease. I even laughed a little at myself for getting worked up over nothing. After breakfast, I decided to walk the old loop. It was clear this place hadn't seen traffic in decades. Nature had cracked through the pavement in wide veins. But the oddest thing was how intact some of the campsites remained. Molded concrete slabs for picnic tables, fire pits ringed with stone. I even found a water spigot, rusted and bone dry. And then I found the sign. It was lying face down in the grass near a splintered post. I flipped it over, half expecting faded Forest Service lettering. But it wasn't that. It was homemade. Burned into wood with some kind of heated tool, jagged and uneven. Tread light. Those who stay too long stay for good. It had to be a joke. Someone playing on the backwoods folklore. The whole spooky Appalachian thing. People love that sort of drama. But the way the letters were seared, it wasn't playful. It felt angry. Warned. Not carved. Still, I shrugged it off. Fear only takes root if you water it. By the time I got back to the van, the sun was high and the temperature had climbed. My Westphalia's interior was stifling, so I opened the side door and cracked the back hatch. Let the air move through. I spent the afternoon reading, sketching the layout of the campground, trying to reconstruct how it must have looked when it was alive. I even started imagining the people who might have camped here. Families with kids. Old couples in those boxy 70s Winnebagos. I kept wondering why the place was abandoned. No obvious fire damage, no floods. It hadn't been bulldozed or razed. It had just stopped being used. At dusk, I heard it, a knocking sound. Not loud, not frantic, just methodical. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 again. I thought it might be wood creaking or maybe a branch falling against a tree, but the rhythm was too perfect, too human. I stood up, scanned the woods. Nothing moved. Then silence again. It didn't return that night. I went to bed with the fire dying low, heart beating faster than I admitted. I dreamt of someone standing at the edge of the trees, not moving, just watching. Their face, if there was one, was blurred out like a smeared photo. When I woke, the van door was open. I could have sworn I locked it. I always do. It's habit, muscle memory. But the latch was undone, and the door had slid 3 inches ajar. I told myself I'd just forgotten, that I'd been tired, that the dream had bled into waking and made me think things were worse than they were. But that day, the forest didn't feel like a backdrop anymore. It felt like something waiting. I told myself I'd stay one more night, just one. Maybe it was pride, maybe stubbornness. I didn't want to leave just because the place was off. That's how I thought of it then. Not haunted, not dangerous, just off. Like a song played a half step too low. I spent the morning cleaning up around camp, stacking some fallen limbs, trying to give the site shape again. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe trying to breathe life into something long dead is what stirs it. Around noon, the air shifted. I don't know how else to describe it. The wind didn't change. The sun still filtered through the trees the same way, but the air itself felt denser, thicker, like walking through molasses or dreams, like the campground was breathing. I took a short hike to clear my head. There was a narrow path that splintered off behind the furthest campsite, nearly grown over, but still walkable. I figured it might lead down to the creek the old man mentioned. I followed it maybe a quarter mile, the sound of the woods pressing close. No animals, no insects, just the shuffle of my boots and the occasional snap of a dry twig underfoot. The path led to what must have once been a communal picnic shelter, the kind you'd see in parks built back in the WPA era. It was collapsing in on itself, one side swallowed by kudzu, the wooden beams dark with age and moisture. But what drew my attention was what sat beneath it. 5 stone circles, deliberate, spaced evenly, like fire pits, but too symmetrical, too clean. In the center of each, a pile of ash, fresh, untouched by rain. I stood there for a long time, waiting to hear or see something move, but nothing did. The air was completely still. I turned around and walked back slowly, retracing my steps exactly. That night, I kept the fire burning longer than usual. There's something ancient about fire, something human. I figured whatever lived in the cracks of this place didn't care for the light. But that didn't stop the knocking. It came again, exactly like before. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 again. Only this time, it was closer. Too close. It sounded like it came from the back of the van. I grabbed the flashlight and swept the woods. Nothing. Not even a branch moving. I circled the van twice, then stood there for a long time just listening. The fire popped. Far off, I thought I heard breathing. But it wasn't an animal sound. It was like someone trying to hold it in, just a catch in the throat behind the trees. So quiet, I almost thought I imagined it. I barely slept. Kept waking to every tiny creak, every shift of shadow across the window. By dawn, I'd made my decision. I was going to leave, but the road had changed. Where the gravel path had been, now there was only forest. Trees pressed in like they'd always been there. No tire tracks, no curve of road. Just thick undergrowth and silence. I walked the perimeter 3 times, convinced I'd missed it somehow. That maybe fatigue or fear had clouded my memory. But no, the road was gone. Or hidden. Or taken. That's when I noticed the quiet. The birds were gone again. And in that silence, I felt something heavy settle in my chest. Not panic, exactly. Not yet. Just a weight, like a hand pressed gently against my sternum. A reminder. I went back to the van, tried to get a GPS signal. Nothing. No bars. No location. Like the whole place had fallen through the cracks of the map. I told myself the sun would rise higher, the fog would burn off, and I'd find the road. Maybe I was just turned around. Maybe I wasn't thinking clearly. So I waited. At noon, I tried again. Walked back toward where I knew the road had been. I marked my path with bits of colored tape I keep in my glove box, just in case. Tied one to a low branch, then another every 20 yards. I must have walked half a mile, then I saw it. A piece of red tape fluttering on a branch. The same piece I'd tied first. I was back where I started. I hadn't turned around. I hadn't looped. I'd walked in a straight line. But the woods had folded in on me. That's when the dread really took hold. Not just fear, but the realization that something was wrong in a way that didn't follow rules. Like the forest itself was bending. I didn't go far from the van after that. I didn't want to tempt the place. That evening, the wind picked up. It carried something strange with it, a smell I hadn't noticed before. Sweet at first, like honeysuckle, but underneath something else. Mold, damp stone, and something chemical. The smell of rot covered in perfume. I closed the van doors early that night, bolted them, checked the locks twice, sat inside with every light on, engine idling just in case. And then came the voice. It wasn't outside. It was in the van. Just a whisper right behind my ear. It said one word, stay. I spun around so fast I nearly dislocated my shoulder, shone the flashlight everywhere, tore through the bedding, opened every cabinet, nothing, no one. I opened the van door and stumbled into the night air, gasping. But the forest wasn't dark. There were lights, dozens of small, flickering points like candles deep in the trees, spaced out in a ring, not moving, just glowing. And behind them, shapes. Human. Still. Watching. I didn't breathe. I couldn't. My lungs clenched around the cold air like they were afraid to inhale what those shapes might exhale. The candles, or whatever they were, kept flickering like they were alive in their own rhythm, pulsing slightly, like fireflies timed to a heartbeat that wasn't mine. And the figures, they didn't move. Not forward, not backward, not even a sway. Just there, dozens of them, far enough away that I couldn't make out faces, but close enough that I felt them watching, not curious, not malicious, just fixed. Like they'd been waiting a long time and now they'd finally been seen. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes, maybe hours. Eventually, one of the flames blinked out, then another, then two more. Not all at once. Slowly, methodically, like an unseen hand was pinching them out one by one. As they disappeared, the figures did too. Each flame took a body with it, melting back into the dark. Until there was just one left. It flickered longer than the rest, like it knew I was watching. Then it went dark too. The clearing was empty again, and silent. I should have run. Every instinct screamed it. My body was already turned half away, my fingers flexed with the muscle memory of sprinting. But I didn't move, because just then something settled behind me in the van. I heard it, the weight of it, like someone lowering themselves onto the mattress. I turned around slowly, heart thudding like a fist inside a padded box. The van door was still open behind me, and the interior lights cast that awful yellow-orange glow across the bedding. The mattress was sunk in the middle, like someone was lying there face down, but no one was visible. Just the weight, the imprint, step by step, not turning my back to it. I moved toward the fire pit, which had long since gone cold. I squatted down, grabbing 2 pieces of split wood like makeshift clubs because the fear had turned primitive now. Not about legends or stories, this was about survival. I waited. I don't know what I expected, an attack maybe, a rush of footsteps, a scream, something explosive. But what I got was worse. A sound. The whisper again. From inside the van. Except now it wasn't behind me. It came from under the van. Same voice, same word, but different tone. A pleading this time. Stay. I backed up so fast I tripped, fell onto my elbows, sticks flying from my hands. And that's when I heard the other sound. Not a whisper. A scrape. Metal on stone. Underneath the van, something was crawling, dragging. I pushed myself upright, circled wide, never taking my eyes off the undercarriage. Then I sprinted into the woods, not far. Just far enough to hide behind one of the old concrete fire pits from the abandoned site. And from there I watched. Nothing came out, no hands, no feet, no face, just the faint echo of something alive under my home. I waited until the sky began to lighten, the kind of early gray that makes shapes look softer, but doesn't feel any safer. Then I returned, inching toward the van with a long stick in hand, like I'd forgotten how useless I'd already proven that to be. I crouched low and peered underneath. Empty, no drag marks, no mud, nothing. Even the dust under there looked undisturbed. I didn't sleep that next night, or the one after. I couldn't bring myself to leave either. There was no road, no signal. I was in a pocket now, a fold. I ate little, drank only what I had in my jugs, didn't dare refill from the stream. It wasn't until the 5th day that I found the note. Slipped under the windshield wiper. Folded once, no handwriting, just printed type, faded and uneven like it came from an old manual typewriter. The mountain keeps what it wants. You are not the first. That was all. No name. No instructions, no threat, but I understood it as clearly as if it had been shouted in my ear. It wasn't about ghosts, it was about memory, about time, about things left behind. That evening I walked the perimeter of the campground again, trying to understand its shape, its pattern. There were 12 pads, 12 drive-in spaces, but when I counted them that day, there were 13. I stood in front of the extra one, no number marker, no gravel, just a bare space between trees. Still, I swear I saw faint tire tracks, old ones, faded like a footprint in snow. I turned away, went back to my site. The moment I stepped onto it, my headlights turned on. I hadn't touched the keys. The engine wasn't running, but the headlights came on anyway, staring into the woods like wide, terrified eyes. And deep inside the woods, beyond the reach of that artificial light, the candles were back. Every single one of them, flickering, forming a wide, perfect circle. And between them, the shadows waited again. I stood completely still, watching the flicker of those distant flames dance behind the tree line. They hadn't been there moments before. I was sure of it. There was no wind, no rustle, just that sudden unnatural glow forming a perfect ring. The woods weren't just dark anymore. They were listening. And the longer I stared, the more I realized the flames weren't stationary. They were drifting, advancing. Not fast, but steady. Like something was walking with them. Something that didn't want to be seen, just felt. I didn't move. Not because I was brave. I couldn't. My body had entered that strange place between action and paralysis, where you become more animal than person, just heartbeat and breath. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The air was fogging in front of me. My breath, visible. The temperature had dropped. Fast. I rubbed my arms, but the chill wasn't skin deep. It settled into my bones, a wet, earthy cold. Like the kind you feel in basements or graveyards. The van door creaked behind me, just a few inches. I turned. It was closing, on its own. I ran to it, reached for the handle, but it slammed shut just before I touched it. Locked. I fumbled in my pocket. The keys weren't there. My hand shook as I searched every compartment on my belt, then the fire pit, the fold-out chair, the picnic table. Nowhere. My only way out, trapped. I looked back toward the tree line. The candles were closer now. I could almost make out the outlines between them. Still, human-like, but wrong in proportion. Some too tall. Others hunched low, and some bent at unnatural angles like they'd never stood upright to begin with. I whispered to myself, "Just a dream, just a dream, just a dream." And then I heard a reply. Not out loud, not through my ears. Inside my skull. I staggered backward. I tripped over the fire pit's ring of stone, landed hard, knocked the wind from myself. That's when the wind started. From nothing to a low howl in seconds, branches snapping above me, leaves ripping through the air. But the flames didn't move, didn't flicker. They stayed steady, protected. As if the wind wasn't real. Or maybe I wasn't. I crawled to my feet and sprinted around the van, trying every door, locked. All of them. My fists pounded the windows like a child begging to be let in, but I was the only one left alive here. Then from inside the woods, a single voice. Childlike, soft, female. "Can you help me?" I froze. It was behind me, just off the gravel, maybe 10 feet into the trees. "Please," I turned slowly. No one, just the gap between two tree trunks, bare, shadowed, lit dimly by the nearest candle. "Please, I'm lost." The voice didn't come from deeper in. It came from the tree, from inside it. "Come find me." I took a step back. "No," I said out loud, my voice cracked. "Please, I'm scared." Then, giggles. Short, childlike, mismatched. Then again, same tone, same words. "Please, I'm scared." Like a recording looped badly. It wasn't asking for help, it was bait. A sound from the other side of the van. Footsteps crunching pine needles. I turned fast, heart slamming into my ribs. Nothing. Then again, behind me again, off to the left. The same footsteps, not circling me, closing in. I ran, blindly, into the woods, away from the flames, deeper into the dark. The instant I passed the tree line, the sounds stopped. Complete silence. Even my own steps felt muffled, like walking on carpet in a padded room. No wind, no insects, just cold and dark. I slowed. Every part of me screamed that I'd made it worse, that I'd gone deeper into its home now. But I couldn't go back. Then, between the trees, I saw something impossible. A trailer. Not mine. An old Airstream, dulled to matte gray, sitting half buried in moss and fallen leaves. Its tires were rotted. A window broken, but the door open, and inside a light. Faint. Yellow. Flickering. I approached slowly, stick in hand again, heart hammering with each step. When I got close enough to see inside, I froze. The interior looked lived in, fresh food on the counter, a worn blanket on the bed, a still steaming mug of coffee on the dinette table. Impossible. But what shattered me, what brought my breath to a complete stop, was the photo taped to the fridge. It was me, standing next to my van, smiling, hand raised like I just waved to someone. But I don't remember that photo being taken. I never posed like that. I stepped back from the trailer, my foot cracking a stick beneath me, and from inside, a whisper. Same word, same voice. Stay. I ran again. I don't know how long. I don't remember the path I took or how I found my way back to the van. But somehow, I did. And the moment I reached it, the doors were unlocked, wide open. The keys sat on the dash like nothing had happened. The candles were gone, the clearing silent again. But the last thing I saw before I started the engine was this. Where the 13th campsite had been, the bare one, now sat another van. Not mine. Identical in model and year, but darker, windows tinted, no plates, and someone was sitting in the driver's seat. Looking at me, smiling. I left. I didn't stop until I reached the first ranger station, hours later, deep into the other side of the park. When I tried to tell them what happened, they said there was no campground that deep in that part of the Smokies, no road, no access. They offered to drive out with me. I refused, and I never went back. But sometimes late at night when I'm parked at a new site, with the doors locked and the lights low, I hear whispers. Soft, just outside the glass. Sometimes they say stay. But lately, they've started saying something else. Welcome home. I didn't sleep for days after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the trees. Not as they are, but as they waited. Quiet, knowing, with too many limbs and too few sounds. I heard that child's voice, distorted and begging, and the worst part was, some part of me still wanted to help her. That's the part I can't shake. It wasn't just fear out there. It was invitation. Something in those woods called to me in a way I can't explain. And even now, after everything, after the drive across 3 states, and the endless hours of silence in motel parking lots, I still feel it under my skin. Like the Smokies left a mark. Not a scratch, not a wound, something deeper. I stopped RV camping for a while, parked the van in a storage lot outside Knoxville, and flew home. But I couldn't rest. I kept waking up between 3 and 4 a.m., always with the same feeling, that someone was watching me from the corner of the room. Not aggressively, not angrily, just waiting. I started hearing things in places I shouldn't. My apartment in Chicago began to creak like the forest floor. Old pipes started hissing like wind through pine. And once, while brushing my teeth, I swear I saw candlelight flicker in the reflection of my mirror, just over my shoulder. When I turned around, nothing. I told myself it was residual fear, a trauma echo. But that didn't explain the photo. It arrived 2 weeks after I got home. No return address, just a plain envelope with no writing on the front. Inside was a single Polaroid, faded and warped slightly with heat. It showed the same clearing, that same rotten picnic table. But this time I was sitting at it, head tilted, smiling, looking right at the camera, and behind me, the 13 vans. All full, all watching. I dropped the photo and never touched it again. That's when I knew it hadn't stayed behind. It had followed me. Or maybe it never had to. I did some research after that. Dug deeper into the Smokies than I ever had before. Not for hikes or trailheads, but for what came before the park. Before the maps, I found stories, old ones, Appalachian families who'd been there before the land was nationalized, before the Civilian Conservation Corps ever laid a road. People who disappeared during forced relocations, campsites that were abandoned and reclaimed by nature, though no one could explain why they went to ruin so fast. Fires that never left a burn scar, echoes in the hollers long after the last voices faded. And one story that froze me solid. A woman from Townsend, Tennessee said her grandfather used to warn her never to camp beyond the old creek forks, where the air gets still and the moss grows up the tree trunks. Said there was that place that doesn't forget you. Even if you try to forget it. She told me, some lands don't care who you are. They just want you back. And that's the thing, isn't it? Some fear doesn't come from running into something evil. It comes from realizing something saw you and let you leave. But only for now. I've tried to get rid of the van 3 times since. Each time something happens. The buyer backs out. The paperwork goes missing. Once, I handed over the keys only for the new owner to crash within 10 miles. No witnesses, no explanation, just gone off the road and into a ravine. And when the tow company pulled the van out, it was clean. No scratch, no dent. Like it had never left the forest at all. So I keep it, not because I want to, because I think I have to. Like, part of me is still tethered there. Like the moment I try to walk away for good, it'll come collect the rest of me. And the worst part, I've started driving again. Not far. Just upstate. Then west, then south. I keep telling myself I'm just trying to enjoy the road again, but that's a lie. I know what I'm doing. I'm circling, getting closer, back toward the Smokies, back toward the abandoned campsite, back to the place that waits. Because somewhere in those trees, beneath that damp soil and warped stone, something remembers me. And I think I'm starting to remember it too. And this time, I don't think it'll let me leave. I've always believed there's a kind of truth that lives in silence, the kind you only hear when you're far away from everyone and everything. That quiet hum of the trees, the whistle of wind slipping between the seams of your vehicle, the hollow breath of the earth below you. I never really understood that truth until the summer I turned 47, deep in the belly of the deep south, where the heat presses against your skin like judgment and the woods never stop watching. I'm Darren, originally from upstate New York, and I've been full-timing in my 78 Volkswagen Westphalia for 6 years. Most of that time was smooth sailing, some engine trouble here and there, a close call with a storm in Colorado, and a few too many nights parked near interstates that felt a little sketchy. But nothing like what happened that summer. Nothing that rewired the way I see people or places. It was late June when I crossed into Mississippi, hugging the Natchez Trace Parkway like it was an old friend. There's a stillness to that part of the country that's hard to explain. It's beautiful, sure. Green hills rolling like waves and ancient trees holding the sky like old sentinels. But beneath it all, something hums. It's not a sound you can name. It's more like pressure in your chest that you didn't realize was there until it starts to grow. The deeper you go, the more it sinks in. I was headed to a small campground near Tylertown, word of mouth only. No website, no road signs, just GPS coordinates and a cryptic note from a fellow VW van lifer I'd met back in Tennessee. Best kept secret, quiet, safe, just don't go wandering too far at night. I shrugged it off. The place was tucked in behind a string of unmarked roads about 20 minutes from the nearest town. When I pulled in, I was struck by how pristine it looked. Not polished or modern, more like a snapshot from 40 years ago. Wooden picnic tables, faded trail signs, a hand-painted office shack with a rusted bell hanging from the porch. And no one else in sight. That should have been my first clue. I parked in the far loop near the tree line. Figured I'd have some solitude, maybe knock out a few journal entries, catch up on editing photos from the road. The first night was uneventful. Crickets sang their chaotic rhythm, and fireflies blinked through the woods like messages written in code. I cooked beans on the stove, read half a chapter of some worn-out horror paperback I'd picked up in Louisiana, and drifted off to the murmur of owls. But sometime around 2 a.m. I woke up with the sudden, sharp sense that something wasn't right. You know that moment when your brain snaps you out of sleep, no dream, no reason, just a gut punch? That's what it felt like. My van was cold, too cold. Like the heat had been vacuumed out even though the day before had pushed high 90s. I sat up and rubbed my arms listening. Nothing. Not even crickets. That silence again, so thick it felt wrong. I peeked out through the windshield expecting to see someone standing outside, but there was nothing. Just dark trees and that eerie stillness. Then I heard it. A knock, not on my van, somewhere off in the woods. Slow, measured, like someone knocking on a tree. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I told myself it was a woodpecker, though I knew better. Woodpeckers don't knock like that at night. I closed the curtain, curled back into my sleeping bag, and tried to will myself into sleep. It didn't work. Morning came like a mercy. Bright light, humid air, the familiar buzz of insects all around. I tried to shake the unease. Made coffee. Walked the nearby trail loop. Convinced myself it had just been my imagination. But then I met the caretaker. She came out of nowhere, an older woman, maybe late 60s, with wiry gray hair and skin like worn leather. She introduced herself as Miss Hallie and asked if I was enjoying the campground. Sure am, I lied. She smiled. A kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You let me know if you hear anything strange out here, she said, real calm. Sometimes the woods don't rest easy, I blinked. What kind of strange? But she just nodded, patted my arm, and walked back into the woods like she knew them better than most know their own homes. I should have left, right then and there, but I didn't. I told myself I was being paranoid, told myself I needed to stay grounded in reality, that fear is just a shadow looking for light. That night, the knocking came again. Closer, 3 knocks, pause, 3 more. But this time it wasn't just sound, it was rhythm, intentional, like someone trying to speak without words. I sat there in the dark, hands clenched around the flashlight, sweating despite the cold that had seeped into the van. And then I heard something else. Breathing. Outside. Right next to the van. Not heavy, not rushed, just slow, steady, like whoever or whatever it was knew I was listening. I didn't move. I barely breathed. That stillness returned, thick and electric, wrapping around me like fog. Eventually it faded. The sounds drifted off, but I didn't sleep, not even a minute. At sunrise, I packed up my gear, heart still hammering in my chest. I stepped outside to stretch and saw them. Footprints. Bare. Human. Leading from the edge of the woods to the passenger side of my van. Then back again. I followed them, stupidly maybe. They disappeared into the dense brush, and sitting there just beyond the edge of the trail was an old hand-carved wooden sign nailed to a tree. The paint was chipped, but I could still read it. We stay where the roots hold us. No idea what it meant. But the longer I stared at it, the heavier my chest felt. I turned around intending to leave, but Miss Hallie was there again, standing in the path behind me. "You saw them," she said. I didn't know how to respond. She nodded. "They don't like visitors staying too long." My throat was dry. "Who are they?" Miss Hallie just looked at me. That same unreadable expression. The ones who never left. And that was when I realized something I hadn't noticed before. There were no other campers, no tire marks, no fire pits that looked recently used. It was just me. Me and the knocking in the woods. I stood there, frozen. Not out of politeness, not even fear. It was something deeper. Like my body knew not to move. Like the woods had reached into my muscles and pressed pause. Miss Hallie didn't speak again. She just gave a small, almost apologetic smile, then walked past me, vanishing down the same path the footprints had gone. I never heard her footsteps. The pine needles swallowed every sound. I returned to the van in a daze, threw my gear into the cabinets, started the engine, hands trembling. I should have driven off right then, but I didn't. Maybe I didn't want to believe I was scared. Maybe I was waiting for some kind of logical explanation to catch up with the irrational things I was feeling. I sat there in the driver's seat for over an hour, engine idling, the morning sun bright overhead, making everything look harmless again. But I couldn't stop thinking about that sign, about those barefoot prints, about that breathing. Then something happened that made up my mind. My phone, which had 0 bars since I got there, suddenly lit up with a notification. No signal, no Wi-Fi, but one notification had somehow made it through. It was a photo of me, taken from outside the van, from the woods. I dropped the phone, my lungs locked, the air felt suddenly tight, almost viscous. I picked it back up slowly, fingers shaking, and zoomed in. There was no mistaking it. It was me, taken the night before, in my sleeping bag. The curtain slightly open, a sliver of my face exposed. Whoever took it had to be standing no more than 10 feet away. I threw the van into drive so fast, the engine bucked. Tires kicked gravel, dust clouding behind me. I didn't care. I just needed to get out. That narrow dirt road twisted like it was designed to disorient. Branches slapped the windshield, and for a moment I swore I saw movement in the trees. Flashes of pale limbs, hair, faces maybe. I don't know. I didn't stop. When I finally hit the main road, I kept driving. 40 miles without pause, hands clenching the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I only stopped when I reached a gas station, pulled into the corner of the lot, and shut the van off. Silence. I was shaking so bad I thought I might pass out. I opened the side door, let the sun hit me. I needed real light, real noise. I needed normal again, but nothing was ever quite normal after that. That night, I found a cheap RV park near the Louisiana border, packed with families, summer travelers, retirees with dogs. People. The kind of people who laugh too loud, who burn hot dogs and tell ghost stories they don't believe. It should have felt safe. I parked between 2 large fifth wheels, locked every door and window, and passed out before sunset. My body was too tired to do anything else. But around 3 a.m. I woke up, not from a dream, not from a sound, but because I was cold again. Freezing. I reached for the flashlight instinctively, not the lantern overhead, not the phone, the flashlight. It's what you do when you're not sure what you'll see. I scanned the inside of the van, nothing out of place. Then I saw it, on the floor, by the sliding door, a small pile of dirt, just a few inches wide, red clay, the kind you only find in southern Mississippi. I didn't scream, I didn't move. My mouth went dry. My thoughts turned into static. I hadn't stepped outside since leaving that place. The van had been locked the entire time, no broken windows, no busted lock. I stared at that dirt for what felt like hours. When the sun finally rose, I swept it up and dumped it outside without a word. For the next few days, I kept to busy areas. National parks, RV resorts, anywhere with people and noise. I thought I'd shaken it. I convinced myself it was over. But the silence always found me again. Every few nights, even in different states, I'd wake up cold. Not just physically cold, but emotionally hollow, like something had crept back in. Once, outside Montgomery, I found a stick-figure effigy hanging from a branch near my sight. Twine and bones. A smile carved into its head with a knife. I pretended not to see it and left before sunrise. Another time in Georgia, a couple approached me at a campground and asked if I'd been to the quiet place in Mississippi. Their eyes were too wide, too focused. Like they were testing me. I lied. Told them no. They smiled and walked off without another word. I began to wonder if there were others like me, people who'd seen something out there, people who knew the truth but didn't have the language to explain it. I started keeping notes, sketches, snippets of memory, trying to put pieces together. It never formed a full picture, but patterns started to emerge. The cold, the silence, the knocking, the footprints, and always that red dirt. One night in northern Alabama, I met an old man named Clay at a roadside diner. He saw my van, complimented the model, said he used to have one back in '82. We got to talking. He asked where I'd been. When I mentioned Mississippi, he got quiet. Then he leaned in, low and serious. "You didn't camp down near Tylertown, did you?" I froze. "Why?" He looked down at his coffee, stirred it once. "They say that land don't belong to us," he murmured. "Never did, even before the settlers. The old tribes avoided it, said the dead there don't sleep. They just wait." I asked him what that meant. But he wouldn't say another word. I didn't press Clay for more. You can feel it when someone's already said too much, like the air around them changes, like speaking further would bring something unwelcome into the room. So I just nodded, thanked him for the company, and went back out to the van. But I didn't drive anywhere that night. I sat in the driver's seat for hours, watching the quiet highway roll past through the window. People went about their lives. Trucks groaned under weight. Taillights blurred into the darkness. And me? I was trying to figure out whether I was being haunted by a place or by a part of myself that I'd left behind in those woods. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I drifted somewhere between dream and thought, my eyes closing just long enough to replay everything I'd seen. That photo, those footprints, Miss Hallie's impossible stare. But sometime before dawn, I made a decision. I was going back. Not because I wanted to, not because I thought it was smart, but because I had to. Somewhere in the silence of those woods, something had gotten into me, and I couldn't outrun it. The longer I drove, the more I realized the road wasn't taking me away from that place. It was taking me in circles. Not literal ones, but spiritual, emotional. I hadn't been free since the moment I stepped into that forest clearing. So the next morning, I turned the van around and headed south again. It was nearly 2 full days before I crossed back into Mississippi. Another half day before I reached the area near Tylertown. But nothing looked the same. Roads had changed, trails were overgrown. Even the GPS couldn't make sense of where I was. At some point, I stopped seeing road signs altogether. The deeper I drove, the more the land felt different. Less like countryside and more like memory. The trees weren't just tall, they felt tall, like they were leaning down to hear my thoughts. The air was thicker than it should have been in October, and once again the signal dropped, all connection lost. Still, I kept going. I passed the moss-choked tree I remembered, turned left at the rusted fence post. Eventually, I reached what was left of the old clearing, but it was different now. Overgrown, twisted, wrong. The sign was gone, no hollow bend marker, no trailhead. It looked like the forest had swallowed it whole and then rearranged itself just to keep me out. But I didn't stop. I parked, packed light, and walked into the brush with a flashlight, a camera, and a compass. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe proof, maybe closure, maybe just the end of the dream. It took almost an hour, cutting through branches and ducking beneath limbs before I found the place where I'd parked the first time. I could tell by the ring of trees, by the slope of the land. Even the soil looked the same, red, packed, faintly wet despite no recent rain. But everything else? Gone. No footprints, no fire pit, no path, no alley, just trees. Hundreds of them, crowding in close like they'd been waiting for me to return. I set up my camera, took photos, tested the compass. That's when I noticed something I still can't explain. The compass needle spun slowly, continuously, never stopping. Not erratic, not broken, just turning. I stared at it for a while. Then I heard it again. The breath. Long, deep, right behind me. I turned fast, light beam cutting through the underbrush. Nothing. But it felt like something had just exhaled over my neck. Like a presence was right there, brushing past my skin. That's when I saw the handprint, pressed into the red soil beside my boot. Fresh, still wet around the edges. 5 fingers, small, childlike, but too long, way too long. I backed up, light shaking, heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to escape. And then I heard something else, knocking from deep in the woods. Not random, not wild. 4 knocks, pause, then 3. I don't know why that rhythm chilled me more than anything else, but it did. It felt deliberate, practiced, like it was a greeting or a warning. I turned to leave. I didn't even bother grabbing the camera, but when I turned around, the van was gone. Gone. I was standing right where I came in. I knew it. I remembered the tree with the split bark, the crumbled fence post, the slight downhill slope. I hadn't wandered far. But the road was gone, and so was my van. I started to shout, first out of panic, then rage, then desperation. Nothing answered me, no echoes, no birds, not even wind. Just that damn silence again, swallowing everything. Then something moved between the trees, fast, low, crawling. I ran. I don't know how long I ran. My lungs gave up before my legs did. I stumbled over roots, scraped my arms, nearly passed out twice. Eventually, somehow, I burst out onto a gravel road. Not the same one I came in on. But it was real, and so was the sound of a pickup in the distance. I flagged it down, breathless, bloody, incoherent. The driver was an older woman. She looked like she'd seen this kind of thing before. Didn't ask much. Just gave me water and let me sit in the truck bed while she took me to town. She didn't say a word the whole ride, but right before we reached the main road, she looked at me through the mirror and said softly, "Sometimes the land wants you back. Don't give it the chance." I wanted to ask her what she meant, but I was too afraid she'd tell me, because deep down, I already knew. That place hadn't just been eerie. It hadn't just been haunted. It had recognized me. It had watched me. And now, I had the gut-wrenching feeling it had marked me. When we reached the edge of town, she dropped me near a diner with a payphone and handed me a folded piece of paper. "You'll need this later," she said. Her voice was dry, like wind through pine needles. I opened it. A single name and a P.O. box address. Nothing more. I looked up to ask her why. Why give this to me? What did she know? What the hell was happening out there? But she was already driving away. That kind of silence stays with you, not the kind that comforts, the kind that crawls inside your ears and makes every word you try to form feel pointless. It stayed with me while I ate greasy eggs and called a friend to help track my van through GPS. It stayed while I tried, unsuccessfully, to explain what happened to a tow truck operator who just shook his head and muttered, "Them woods play tricks, man." They found my van 3 miles from where I'd parked it, just sitting on the side of an old logging road. No keys missing. No scratches, no signs of a break-in, no footprints around it, nothing. It was like it had been moved by air. I didn't speak much during the ride back to it. I didn't care about the weird looks or the questions from the tow guy. I just got behind the wheel, started the engine, and drove. But not north, not away. I drove back to that P.O. box address the woman had given me. It took me through 2 counties, a turnoff with no signage, and finally into a sleepy little parish called Wilma's Hollow. You'd miss it if you blinked. A gas station, a chapel, and a post office that looked like it hadn't changed since 1950. I walked inside and handed the note to the clerk. He was old, hunched, and blind in one eye. He didn't ask for ID, just looked me up and down and said, "She sent you, huh?" I didn't answer. He reached behind the counter and handed me a box, wrapped in brown paper, twine around the edge, no return address. just a name etched on the side in blue ink, Reverend Elsby. Inside were 6 photographs, one of the forest, my forest, one of the sign I'd seen the first time, Hollow Bend, Camp with Care, one of a woman that looked exactly like Hallie, younger in black and white, standing in front of a chapel, and 3 that I will never unsee. The first was of a clearing at night, and a tall, skeletal figure, blurry, standing just at the edge of the frame. Its limbs too long, its posture wrong. The second was a series of handprints, just like the one I saw in the soil. Some were crawling up a tree trunk like something had climbed it backward. And the last, a group photo, old, maybe from the 1940s. People in early camper gear, all gathered in that same forest clearing, smiling awkwardly for the camera. All of them had their eyes scratched out, except one, Hallie, or someone who looked just like her. She stood in the middle of the group, but she wasn't smiling. She was staring straight at the lens, and somehow at me, as if the photo had been waiting for me to see it. I didn't sleep that night, didn't even try. I locked all the doors, pulled the shades in the van. I kept the box beside me, thinking maybe I was being given a warning or an answer, or both. But sometime around 3 a.m., I heard it again. Knock, 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 pause, then 3 knocks. Right on the outside wall of the van. I froze. My heart stopped, literally stopped. I could feel it seize up in my chest like a misfired engine. The knocks didn't come from the door. They came from the rear panel, the one closest to where I slept. No footsteps, no voice, just that same deliberate rhythm. And then I smelled it, the coppery scent again, but stronger now. Like a knife had just been dragged through flesh, like old iron and dead leaves and something far, far worse. I waited. Every second felt like a razor slicing time apart, but nothing followed. Just silence. And that feeling like someone was still there, crouched beneath the window, grinning without a mouth. I stayed frozen until the sun came up, and when it did, there was nothing outside. No prints, no marks, no scratches, just a small dead bird on the windshield. Its wings spread like it had been placed there, like an offering. I don't even remember starting the van. I just drove, all day, until the map barely made sense and the roads stopped having names. At one point, I crossed into Alabama, and I didn't even realize it until I saw a faded welcome sign covered in vines. I wasn't running anymore. I was drifting, trying to put distance between myself and something I didn't understand, but that understood me, that knew me, that wanted me back. Even now, I don't park in wooded areas. I stick to pavement, to noise, to crowded RV parks where every stranger is less of a threat than the silence I left behind. But sometimes when I wake up, I still smell copper. Sometimes I hear that knocking in my dreams, and sometimes I swear I see her face in my side mirror, just for a second, standing by the trees, waiting. I told myself it was over, that it was just a bad experience I needed to put behind me. I tried to be rational. I read articles on mass hysteria, backwoods folklore, even old gas leak hallucinations. I convinced myself it could have been trauma bubbling up in strange ways. Maybe I'd hit my head. Maybe sleep deprivation had warped my sense of time and place. But deep down, I was lying. Because I never truly left that forest. Not in my mind, and apparently not in my trail. 3 weeks later, while parked in a coastal lot in Mississippi, full sun, ocean air, all the things that should have made me feel safe, I got another letter. Not in the mail, not handed to me. It was slipped through the tiny seam in my window while I slept. No return address, just the same blue ink I saw in the box before. It only had 4 words. You went too far. I didn't scream, I didn't panic, because I'd felt it building again. Quiet footsteps behind silence, a pressure in the air that could be blamed on weather or wind. It was like the Deep South itself was holding its breath, and I'd finally learned to listen. I burned the letter in an aluminum pie pan and dumped the ashes in the Gulf. But it didn't matter. Something had followed me. That evening, I noticed a couple parked 2 spaces down. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Family RV. Polite, quiet, nothing strange, until I caught the woman standing outside my van around midnight, just staring at my side mirror. Not at the window, at the mirror. Like she was waiting to be reflected. She didn't move when I turned the light on. She only walked away after I stepped outside, barefoot on the gravel, heart in my throat. No words, no explanation. I asked them about it the next morning. She smiled and said she hadn't left the RV all night, swore on it. I watched her husband's face while she said it, and I saw something there, a flicker of fear. Not directed at me, but at her, like he was afraid she meant it, like he didn't even know what she might do anymore. I left before sunset, told myself it was just a coincidence, but the pattern was starting to emerge and it was getting harder to deny. Something had been disturbed, unburied, and it wasn't staying put. I kept driving inland through Alabama's old routes, where the kudzu swallows signs and the pavement splits like scars through the swamp. I parked in well-lit areas, slept with earplugs, stopped journaling, stopped tracking time. But I couldn't stop what came next. Outside a diner in Andalusia, I met a man who said he'd seen my van before, swore he saw it parked in Hollow Bend 2 nights ago. He even described the bumper sticker. My van hadn't been anywhere near that place since the incident. I told him he was mistaken, but he was insistent, dead serious. And when I asked him where exactly he'd seen it, he got quiet, said he wouldn't go back near those woods. Then he said something that chilled my blood. You ever hear it talk to you? The woods, I mean, not words, just pressure, like it wants to be inside you. He said it like a man confessing a murder, and then he left, just stood up from his coffee and walked out. I checked my van that night, every panel, every door. I looked for tracking devices, prank notes, footprints, nothing. Just the echo of that man's words and a new smell, not copper this time, but rot. Subtle, like something had died a long time ago and was trying to whisper its memory through the vents. It faded after I drove for a while, but the feeling didn't. That night, I dreamed of Hallie again. Same clearing. Same skyless dark. But this time, I wasn't alone. There were others, people from the older now, wetter. Like they'd been waiting in soil for too long and had only just remembered how to stand. Their eyes were gone, mouths stitched shut. Only Hallie spoke. Her voice was different, deeper, fractured. She didn't move her lips. She just looked at me and said, "You brought it back. Now we all remember." I woke up screaming, sweating through my shirt, heart flailing like an animal in a trap. There were handprints on the inside of my windshield, smaller than mine, 4 fingers, no thumb. They faded before sunrise, but I saw them, and I knew this wasn't over. Whatever Hollow Bend was, it had roots. Not just in the soil, but in memory, in blood, in grief, and now, in me. I stopped using the GPS, stopped planning routes, stopped logging destinations. Something about technology started to feel wrong, like each signal I put out was being mirrored, caught, fed into something I couldn't trace. So I did what I used to do back when I first started RV camping, before social media, before uploads, before hashtags and digital check-ins. I drove until I felt nothing. No pull, no whisper, just blank silence in my chest. I found a gravel turnout somewhere near the Georgia border, near a swamp. Not the kind you find in brochures or trail guides. This one didn't even have a name, no signs, no maps, just cypress trees leaning like old teeth and a black stillness in the water that felt more like oil than life. But it was quiet, dead quiet. And I thought maybe, just maybe, it was finally over. I parked beneath a skeletal oak, turned off the van and listened. Nothing, no knocks, no humming, not even birds. I slept with the windows cracked, just a bit. Let the night in. Around 2 a.m. I heard it. Scraping. Not on the outside, from underneath, like something dragging itself along the floorboards. Not an animal, not claws. Flesh, thick, wet, slow. My first instinct was to move, to start the engine and bolt, but something in me froze. I remembered what Hallie said in the dream. You brought it back. I couldn't keep running. I had to know. I had to see. I reached for the floor mat and peeled it back with shaking hands. The sound stopped. Silence again. So sharp it made my ears ache. Then, right where the mat had been, I saw it. A mark. No, not a mark. A burn, like someone had branded the floor. It was circular, full of symbols I couldn't decipher. Spirals within spirals, almost like roots or veins. Still warm to the touch, I snapped a picture of it, or tried to, but the photo never saved. Every time I opened my gallery, the image flickered, then disappeared, replaced with black static. Then that static started to pulse like a heartbeat. I deleted it, turned off my phone, and that's when I noticed the fog. It was thick, rolling in from the swamp like it had purpose. Not moisture, not weather, something else. And in that fog, I saw a shape, not a person, not quite an animal. It stood wrong, shoulders too wide, neck too long. Like it had studied humans, tried to mimic them, but gave up halfway through. It didn't move, just watched. No eyes I could see, but I felt them, staring straight into me, past me, into the part of me that still remembered Hollow Bend. I stepped out of the van. My legs didn't want to move, but I forced them. I stood barefoot on the gravel, feeling every jagged edge like a punishment. The fog wrapped around me, wet and sour, like breath, and the shape tilted its head, as if curious, as if asking permission. I don't remember screaming, but when I came to, it was dawn. I was in the driver's seat, seatbelt on, keys in the ignition. My clothes were soaked, but the ground outside was dry. There was mud on my feet, mud that smelled like death. I checked under the van. The burn mark was gone. No trace of it, except for one thing, a hairline crack in the metal frame, right beneath where the mark had been. And etched inside that crack, barely visible but unmistakable, was a word. One I hadn't said aloud since that night in the clearing. Hallie. I didn't cry. I didn't drive. I just sat there for hours, watching the sunlight spill over the trees like gold over bones. Something had followed me all this way. Something older than trauma. Older than names. And I realized this wasn't about escape. It never had been. It was about witnessing. And now that I'd seen it, now that I carried it, maybe it could finally leave her alone. Maybe. But I had to be sure. I drove without music, without speaking, without breathing, it felt like. Back roads through southern Georgia blurred into northern Florida. Swamp, pine, rusting signs, roads that hadn't been repaved since the 60s. The van didn't hum the way it used to. Now it groaned. Like it too knew something was wrong. Something heavy riding with me. I didn't stop for gas until the tank was bone dry. Didn't eat unless I could barely hold the wheel. Each time I looked into the rearview mirror, I expected to see her, Hallie, not as she was, but as she had become. The version the woods twisted into a lesson. But she wasn't there, just the fog, even in daylight now. A strange low haze that followed me no matter how far I ran. Creeping along the tree line, hovering in rest stops, bleeding up from bathroom drains. It had attached itself to me like scent, like memory, and I still didn't understand why, until I reached the Gulf, an old half-forgotten fishing campground near Apalachicola. No one there, just empty RV hookups, rusted-out crabbing traps, and a wind that didn't sound like wind at all. I parked near the edge of the inlet, watched the brown water roll against the bank like it was breathing. That night, I finally let it come. Didn't run. Didn't hide. I left the van door wide open and sat on the steps, staring out at the darkness until it began to shiver. First the air, then the trees, then my skin. And from the far side of the marsh, the shape came again. Not walking, just appearing. One blink, it wasn't there. The next, it was halfway across the lot, no footsteps, no sound. Its limbs were too long, arms like draped cloth, joints bending the wrong way like it had no bones. And its head, low, slanted forward like a beast, but with a face shaped just enough like a human to hurt to look at. It stopped 10 feet from me, close enough to feel its breath, except it wasn't breathing, it was waiting, like it wanted me to speak. Like it needed me to say the one thing I never had. So I did, not for it, for her. I left her behind. I whispered it, but it echoed, in the trees, in the water, in the bones of the van. I left her in those woods. I thought I could save myself. I thought I could outrun what happened there. I thought, maybe if I didn't look back, it would just be a story. The figure didn't move, but I felt the weight shift, like the truth was unlocking something. I shouldn't have run. I should have tried to bring her out, or at least told someone. But I didn't. I erased her, like the others, like she never mattered. A pause. Then the thing smiled. Not with lips, but with intention. A stretching of shadow, a widening of stillness. And it reached out, not to hurt me, to offer something. Its fingers brushed mine, and in that second I saw everything, not just Hallie, but the others, all the forgotten ones. People like us, campers, travelers, wanderers, drawn to empty places, thinking the wilderness only held silence, but it remembers. Every whisper, every wrong turn, every soul who disappeared without being mourned. We are stories it refuses to forget. I woke up at sunrise in the driver's seat. No fog, no marks. No blood, just a single object in my lap, a bracelet. Leather and copper, frayed. The same one Hallie wore every day. I'd helped her make it back in Tennessee. I didn't cry. I held it and whispered, "I remember you." Then I started driving, not away, not toward anything either, just through, letting the road stitch me back together, one county at a time. I drove until the Gulf turned to bayou, and the bayou bled into the pine flatwoods of central Florida. There were no checkpoints, no boundaries, just a slow, almost imperceptible shift in light and sound. The deeper I went, the quieter the world became. Not silent exactly, just withheld, like the air itself had retreated a few inches away from my skin. I stopped at a remote pull-off, somewhere between Ocala and nothing, where the moss hung low enough to brush my roof, and the trees pressed so close together it looked like they were whispering. I didn't intend to stay long, but something told me I had to. Not because it was safe, because it wasn't. It felt like the place remembered me, like it had been waiting. That night, I dreamed of Hallie for the first time since the swamp, not the warped version. Not the one the woods twisted. Just her laugh echoing through a trail, her boots sticking in Georgia mud, her head on my shoulder under a cracked skylight whispering, "If we vanish, promise me someone will remember." I woke up choking on the memory. Outside, the fog had returned, but not like before. This time, it wasn't crawling, it was watching. Thick and still just beyond the tree line, not even pretending to be natural anymore. I didn't fight it. I stepped into it barefoot. It didn't resist, it welcomed, and I walked deeper into the woods than I'd ever dared. Minutes passed, hours. Time split apart and folded in on itself like wet paper. I found an old clearing, ringed by cypress trees and bone dry despite the dripping canopy above. There were remnants of old fire pits, rusted RV doors torn off their hinges and leaned like gravestones against rotting trunks. An old license plate hammered into a stump. This place ate campers, but it didn't want to hide them. It wanted them found, a place of forgetting that yearned to be remembered. I dropped to my knees and placed Hallie's bracelet in the center of the clearing. My voice cracked when I spoke. "You're not erased." No wind, no shift in air pressure, but something changed. The fog peeled back slowly, one tendril at a time, like it was satisfied. I waited, expecting another figure, but none came, just the silence, which now felt sacred instead of haunted. I walked back to the van with the weight lifted, not gone, but named. There's a difference. Naming things strips them of their power, but not their meaning. And I understood finally what all of this had been for. The Deep South holds stories that won't be buried. The trees know, the dirt knows. The fog that hunts you isn't always trying to hurt you. Sometimes it's dragging memory back from the depths, begging you to look, to mourn, to carry those who were lost, not just in fear, but in truth. I left the woods that morning not because I had conquered them, but because I had listened. There's a kind of freedom that comes when you stop running and start remembering. I didn't rush back to civilization. I didn't post online or call anyone or try to explain what had happened. Some things don't survive being spoken in casual tones. Some truths need silence to bloom, but I did keep driving. Not away from fear, but with it. Letting it sit in the passenger seat like an old friend. Not a threat, not an enemy, just part of the ride. The next few nights I camped in places I'd once avoided. Low-traffic dirt sites outside Montgomery, a swamp-hugged pullout near Mobile, a stretch of river sand south of Baton Rouge where locals swore the owl sounded too human. And I didn't hide from the dark. I let it in. I watched the way the trees moved at night. I listened to every snap of twig, every breath of wind that didn't sound like wind, and I waited, not for the fear, but for the familiarity of it. Because fear, once you learn its language, isn't always a warning. Sometimes it's a signal, a reminder that what you're doing matters, that the trail you're on isn't safe, but it's true. And truth, especially in the Deep South, isn't clean. It comes tangled in roots and history and the bones of things no one wants to admit they lost, but we carry it anyway. We have to, because that's what remembering is. By the time I crossed into Mississippi, something in me had shifted permanently. I didn't check GPS anymore, didn't care about signal strength or campground reviews or whether the parking area had been recently maintained. I followed instinct, sound, temperature, that feeling in your gut when something old is near, not evil, just ancient and lonely. One night, I pulled off onto a narrow trail by a river no one could name. There was a van already parked there, older than mine, beaten up, with Louisiana plates that hadn't been renewed since the 90s. Someone had lived in it once, maybe died in it. I felt no fear, only reverence, like I'd stumbled into a shrine. Inside, everything was still. Dust thick on the dash, an old lantern sitting half full on the counter, and pinned to the corkboard above the bed, a photo. 2 women, mud-splashed and grinning, a little faded bracelet looped around the corner of the frame. My breath caught in my throat. Hallie? No, not her, but someone like her. Another story, another van, another pair of campers swallowed by the same deep hush I'd walked through. I left the photo right where it was, didn't take anything, just stood there a moment longer and said, I see you. The air stirred, and for the first time in weeks, I felt warmth in the wind. Like the woods were grateful, like they were glad I didn't pretend none of this ever happened. I stayed one last night in that place. Didn't sleep, didn't want to. I sat on the van's roof under a sky so wide it made you feel like a pinhole in the universe. And I listened. Not to music, not to distractions, but to the stillness. There's something sacred about silence in a place that once tried to bury its memories. I thought about all the strange things I'd seen over those weeks, all the people who never made it back, all the ones who still wandered the woods, etched into fog and bark and wind. I thought about Hallie, not the version that was taken, but the one who dared me to keep going, to face the dark and find the lesson inside it. You see, the Deep South has its own way of remembering, its own rhythm of grief and reverence. And the woods here, they don't just haunt, they test. They strip you down, peel you open, and ask the question no one wants to answer. Who are you when no one is watching? I was a mess when I first rolled into Georgia, chasing ghosts and avoiding pain, pretending that the right campground or the right view or the right moment would fix something inside me. But the real transformation didn't come under a sunset. It came in the dark, when I was alone, afraid, and still chose to stay, to listen, to remember. I realized something out there, something most people don't learn until it's too late. Fear isn't the enemy. Forgetting is. Because when we forget what scared us, we forget what it taught us. And when we forget who we lost, we lose ourselves too. Now, I don't drive to escape. I drive to remember, to find the echoes in old campsites and listen to the warnings carved into moss and pine. I don't run from the strange anymore. I ask it what it wants me to know. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't the whisper in the woods or the shadow at the edge of your firelight. It's the truth we keep trying not to face. That we survived when others didn't. And that means we carry them. Their stories, their silence, their strength. So if you're out there, on the road, hearing things you can't explain or feeling that itch at the back of your neck that tells you to go the other way, don't ignore it. Don't run, but don't surrender either. Stand still, breathe deep, and ask yourself, what is this place trying to tell me? Because every campground has a story, every van has ghosts, and every mile you drive through the Deep South, you're moving through memory. You're part of something older than fear, wider than grief, something sacred. You just have to be brave enough to feel it, and when you do, you won't come back the same. You'll come back whole. Whole. I don't know what I expected when I pulled into that forgotten lot just outside Winslow, Arizona. A place not even marked on the map. A place that hadn't seen fresh tire tracks in what looked like a decade. The gravel crunched under my wheels like brittle bones. My dog, Jasper, let out a low growl from the passenger seat. He didn't growl much. That was the first sign. I was 3 months into a 6-month solo trip around the US, traveling in a rust-colored Volkswagen Westfalia I'd bought from a guy in Oregon. He said it had good energy. Maybe he just wanted to get rid of it. The day had started like any other. High desert winds, sun sharp enough to feel like it peeled a layer off your skin. I had no plan that evening. Just the kind of exhaustion that made you pull over anywhere flat and call it rest. The faded wooden sign read, Silver Pines RV Retreat. But every pine tree I saw was dead, gray spires pointing at the sky like accusations. The post it hung from was rotted halfway through, leaning as if the earth had grown tired of holding up forgotten places. I should have known better. My dad used to say, nothing good grows near the bones of a failed dream. I backed into a slot near the edge of the loop where the pavement had cracked like a spider web and weeds had staked their claim. There were about 12 spots total. Most still had hookups, rusted and dangling. I didn't test them, didn't need electricity. I was just looking for somewhere to lay low for the night. The sun was dipping fast, throwing long shadows across the lot, painting the cliffs in a cruel reddish glow that made everything feel haunted. I left Jasper in the van and stepped outside to stretch my legs, take a walk, shake off the fatigue. That's when I noticed the silence. The real kind of silence. Not just absence of cars or chatter, but the unnatural kind. No birds, no insects, no wind through the grass. The stillness felt manufactured, like a track with the ambient noise stripped out. I told myself it was elevation, season change, whatever excuse I could conjure up in the moment. But when I turned back to the van, Jasper was standing alert, head high, staring out the windshield with every hair raised on his back. His eyes locked onto something. I followed his gaze. At the far end of the loop sat a wide, sun-bleached Class A RV, long abandoned. Its windows were gray with dust. The air around it just looked heavier, like the light bent different there. Jasper didn't stop staring. I tried calling him, but he wouldn't move. That should have been the second sign. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped forward, the crunch of dead gravel beneath my boots the only sound. I told myself maybe the RV attracted coyotes, or was housing some road-weary squatters. That kind of thing happens more than you'd think. I got maybe 10 feet from it when the smell hit me. Old places smell musty, rot and dust, maybe mildew, but this was something deeper. It was coppery, sharp, like rust and wet carpet and mold, something that clung to the back of your throat. I circled to the front, feeling that tightening in my chest that always comes when your gut knows something before your brain can accept it. The windshield was covered in small handprints, dozens of them, smeared in a dark reddish brown. Not paint, not dirt, something thicker. I froze. No footprints, no bike tracks, no sign of children, just those tiny handprints. I slowly backed away. Logic kicked in, tried to overtake the rising nausea in my gut. Maybe they came from a nearby road. Maybe it was a prank. But I'd seen the terrain. No one had been out here in weeks, maybe months. I walked back to the van. Jasper was inside now, pacing, watching the same RV. That night, I kept the lights low and the curtains shut. I made dinner half-heartedly, staring at the pot but not tasting anything. I told myself I'd leave at first light, just sleep, just get through the night. But when I finally lay down in the back with Jasper curled at my feet, I felt that pressure, like the air had weight, like something unseen had entered the van with me. I woke to knocking, not at the door. Outside, a slow, deliberate knock, knock, knock. It wasn't metal, it sounded like hollow wood. I bolted upright. Jasper was already on alert, lips peeled back, growling deep in his throat. He rarely barked, but the growl meant more. It was warning. It was fear. I grabbed the flashlight, heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my ears. I peeked through the curtain. Nothing. The knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. Further this time, near the back of the loop. Then silence. Then a soft creak, like a door. I opened the side door slowly and stepped out, light beam cutting through the darkness like a blade. Everything was motionless, even the weeds. I turned toward the abandoned RV. Its door was open. It had been closed earlier. I was certain of it. Now it hung wide. Inside was shadow, deeper than night. I couldn't see more than outlines, a kitchenette, the edges of a torn curtain, and then I saw it. Movement, just for a second, at the far end, like someone stepping back, retreating into the dark. I raised the light, voice dry in my throat. Hello? No answer. But the air felt wrong, thicker, charged, and that smell, stronger now. I stepped back again. I had no business getting closer. But something pulled at me. Not curiosity, defiance. Like if I didn't confront it, it would follow me. Find me again down some other forgotten road. Then I saw the writing. Inside, across the interior walls, smeared in the same dark substance as the handprints. You shouldn't have come. I turned and walked quickly back to the van. Didn't run. Not yet. Jasper was whining, pawing at the door. I slid into the driver's seat and tried the ignition. Nothing. Not even a click. Battery had been fine, no reason it shouldn't start. Tried again, still nothing. Then the knocking came back. Closer. Knock, 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 right against the side panel. Then another. Knock, knock. from the back, then the roof. The sound measured, like someone or something was walking the perimeter of the van and tapping as they passed, like counting or warning. Jasper's growl had turned to a quiet whimper. He pressed himself flat against the rear bench, his ears pulled so far back they nearly disappeared into his fur. That dog had camped with me through thunderstorms, bear territory, and a meth-fueled standoff in Nevada. He wasn't soft, but whatever was out there had him shaking. I held the keys tighter and tried the ignition again. Nothing, just the soft click of a dead starter, and my heart thundering in my chest like a war drum. I didn't dare step out this time. Something in the air had shifted. The fear wasn't abstract anymore. It had shape. Intent. I didn't want to shine my flashlight through the curtains again. I didn't want to know what was standing outside. But I couldn't just sit there and wait. That's how people disappear. That's how stories like mine end in silence. I forced my breath to slow, counted the knocks. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, 3. Another pause. Then silence again. Not a single footstep. Just those spaced knocks, like it was trying to send a message in code. Or worse, wait for a response. I pulled my phone from the dashboard cradle. No service. Not even the courtesy bar you sometimes get when you're close to a signal. I switched on the interior lights, and they flickered. Every bulb in the van blinked once, twice, then dimmed like someone was pulling power away. Jasper's eyes darted toward the ceiling. Thud. One solid impact from above. The whole van rocked slightly. I pressed my back against the wall and stared at the ceiling. No shadows, no shapes. Just the soft, creaking moan of the roof as if something had climbed up there and settled in. And then, scratching. Long, deliberate dragging of nails or claws across the metal. I whispered, "Nope," like saying it out loud could cancel this whole moment. I grabbed the emergency jump pack from under the bench seat, one of those lithium battery starters I always kept for backup. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The next knock was right at the driver's window. I didn't look. I couldn't. I plugged in the jumper, pressed the ignition switch. The van roared to life like it knew I needed it. I yanked it into gear and hit the gas, wheels spinning on the loose gravel as I shot forward, headlights blazing a path through the dead trees. I didn't look back. Couldn't. Whatever was behind me, I didn't want to see its face. I didn't want to remember it any more vividly than I already would. It took about a minute before the loop curved around and spat me back out onto the main road. I drove fast, headlights trembling on the cracked pavement, not stopping, not even breathing right until I'd gone 10 miles out and found a lit-up gas station near a truck stop. I parked, turned the engine off, and sat there with my hands still clutched to the wheel. Jasper crawled into the front seat and rested his head on my thigh. His body was still trembling. His fur was soaked in sweat. Neither of us slept that night. The next day, I called a local sheriff's office to report what happened. I told them about the abandoned RV, the smeared handprints, the strange knocking. The woman on the other end paused, then said, "Silver Pines?" I blinked. "Yeah. You sure you weren't drinking or high?" "I wasn't." She sighed. "Look, that place has been shut down since '04. Family owned it. Whole property was seized after some incidents. Multiple missing persons reports, but nothing ever proved. Locals don't go near it anymore. Not even squatters. You're not the first to call about it." I asked her what kind of incidents. She got real quiet and said, "Officially, vagrancy, structural collapse, suspected wildlife activity. Unofficially, things folks don't want to talk about." That was all she'd say. I hung up and sat there in silence, trying to piece together what I'd seen, what I'd felt. That pressure, that smell, the deliberate nature of the sounds. It wasn't wildlife. That wasn't wind or rodents. Something wanted me to find that RV, or maybe wanted me to stay. Over the next few days, I tried to shake it off. I stayed at busier campgrounds, KOAs, state parks, spots with lantern light and noise and the comfort of other people. But something had changed in me. I kept checking mirrors, jumped at creaking branches. I'd wake in the middle of the night, certain I heard knocking again. Always in sets. 1, 2, pause. By the time I made it to New Mexico, I had nearly convinced myself it was exhaustion, heat stroke, paranoia, until I met Carl. Carl ran a parts and maintenance station just off Route 60. I stopped in because the van had started acting strange, electronics flickering, battery draining faster than normal. He took a look under the dash and then stepped back with this weird expression. "You got interference," he said. "From what?" He held up a small black device, half melted, half buried near the battery wiring. "Not stock. Somebody planted this." I stared at it. "What is it?" "Hard to tell now. Could be a tracker. Could have been something to drain the battery. Military types used to rig up stuff like this to kill a vehicle in a pinch." "Why would someone put that in an old van?" He shrugged. "Sometimes folks don't want you leaving." I stayed in Carl's lot that night, lights all around. Jasper wouldn't leave my side, not even to pee. That was 2 weeks ago. But last night, camped near an RV park in Utah, I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow taps against the rear panel. I jumped out, nothing there, no footprints, no wind, just that damn smell on the air again, damp copper and mold. And on the driver's side mirror, fresh handprints. Small, smaller than a child's. I scrubbed them off with bleach, but I know it's not over. Whatever I drove away from in that Arizona lot, whatever lives in those forgotten parks we pretend don't exist, it followed me. And now, I think it's looking for another place to settle in. I should have turned back. That's what I keep telling myself. After everything that happened in Arizona, after the tracker, the handprints, the knocks, any sane person would have parked the van at a friend's house, caught a flight home, and left the whole nightmare behind. But I couldn't. Not because I was brave, not because I had something to prove. It was something deeper than that. Something darker. Like whatever I left behind was still attached to me, and if I stopped moving, it might catch up for good. So I kept driving. West into Utah, north along the edges of the Wasatch Range. The land changed. Red rock turned to pale cliffs. The sky stretched wider, but the feeling never left. That sense that something was watching me. Waiting. Hitching a ride just out of sight. I started parking only at packed campgrounds, always near other rigs. I made excuses when folks invited me to quieter places, said my dog didn't like being alone, or that I was dealing with electrical issues. And then I met Erin. She was parked in a faded Winnebago 3 slots down from me at a state park near Bear Lake. Early 40s maybe. Sharp eyes. Wore her hair in a braid down her back and looked like she could out-hike half the people half her age. We shared a fire pit one night when someone left early and the staff told us we could double up. We were swapping stories. Funny ones at first. The usual, bears in the trash, broken axles in the middle of nowhere, weird campground neighbors. But something shifted when I mentioned Arizona. I didn't go into detail, just said I'd been near Winslow, ran into some strange stuff. I expected her to shrug it off, maybe nod and move on, but instead she went quiet. Then she said, "Silver Pines?" I froze. She didn't laugh. She didn't smile. She just stared into the fire. "I was there," she said. "About 8 years ago. Didn't know what it was. Just needed a spot to crash overnight." I didn't say anything. She glanced at me. "Did it mark you too?" I felt my throat tighten. "What do you mean?" Erin rolled up her sleeve. There was a faded, almost healed-over scar just above her elbow. It was long and narrow, like a fingernail had been dragged across her skin. But what struck me wasn't the shape, it was how the skin around it looked. Wrong. Paler. As if something had drained the color out of it. "I didn't even know I had it," she said. Until a week after I left that place, started hearing things, feeling watched, knocked at night, like a pattern. She met my eyes. 3 knocks? I nodded slowly. "It's how they find you," she whispered. "They don't need to chase, just need to know you listened." We sat in silence for a long time. Then she added, "They can't get in unless you open the door. That's the rule. Doesn't matter how loud it gets or how real the voices sound." I asked her what she meant. "What voices?" She just said, "If you hear someone you love, don't answer. It's never them." The next night, I parked my van far from hers, not because I didn't believe her, but because I did. And if what she said was true, I didn't want whatever had followed me to jump ship and climb aboard her Winnebago. I don't know how this thing works, if it's physical, spiritual, both, but I wasn't going to risk dragging someone else deeper into it. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of whispers just outside the van. Not knocks, not footsteps. Voices. Familiar ones. At first, I thought it was campers. Then I heard my sister's voice, but my sister lives in Minnesota and hasn't camped in years. Then I heard my dad's voice, and he's been dead for over a decade. Clear as day, just outside the driver's side window, he said, "Hey kiddo, it's cold out here, let me in." I held my breath. Then he said it again. "Come on now, open the door. I just want to talk." It sounded exactly like him, right down to the cadence, the warmth, the little hitch he had when he said the word talk. I almost opened it. My hand was on the latch when Jasper growled. Not a scared growl, a warning, a low, primal sound I'd never heard from him before, and that saved me. I backed away from the door and pulled the curtain just an inch aside. There was no one there, no footprints in the gravel, no breath on the glass, just empty air and a cold fog rolling along the edge of the site. The next morning, Erin was gone, van and all, no note, no goodbye, just her spot, empty. I asked the ranger if she checked out. He said she never checked in. Said no one by that name had a permit. No registration on file. No Winnebago seen entering. I know what I saw. But I started to wonder, did Erin ever exist? Or was she part of this thing too? Another baited hook disguised as help? I didn't know what to believe anymore. I drove north into Idaho, then Montana, sticking to major roads, always moving, never more than one night in the same place. I started hearing the knocks more frequently, sometimes in the daytime now. Once at a rest stop, once while fueling up, once when I was brushing my teeth in the tiny sink and something tapped on the mirror from inside. The smell was worse too, stronger. That same copper mold rot, but now it followed me into the shower, into cafes, even into laundromats. I started to think maybe it wasn't just attached to the van. Maybe it was on me. I stopped talking to other campers. Stopped sharing fire pits. Every knock, every flicker of the lights, every strange voice, I kept it to myself. Because how do you explain that something might be hitching rides between forgotten campgrounds, hiding in the bones of abandoned RVs, and moving through the people who stay there just a little too long? Who would believe that? And yet, there's a pattern to these places, a rhythm, abandoned lots that don't show up on maps. RVs that look too pristine for how long they've supposedly sat there, doors that are always unlocked, lights that flicker with no power line in sight, and always, the knocking. 1, 2, pause, 1, 2, 3, and then silence. Just long enough for you to think it's safe, just long enough for you to open the door. I thought maybe I could outrun it. Montana, Idaho, Washington. I burned through miles like I was trying to erase something, but whatever it was, it didn't need roads. It didn't obey state lines. It just kept finding me. And I started to realize something even worse than the fear. I wasn't running from it anymore. I was running toward something, like a gravity pulling me in. Like all those back roads, all the broken down trailers and faded campground signs. They were breadcrumbs, leading somewhere I didn't want to go but couldn't stop heading toward. It was in Oregon that I broke down for the first time. Not the van, me. The van was fine, better than fine. But my mind was cracking. It was late September. I pulled into a clearing near the base of Mount Hood, a dispersed camping site I'd found on a forum. Someone said it was peaceful, off-grid, surrounded by pines. I needed that. Somewhere quiet, somewhere clean. The forest was dense there, ancient. It pressed against the van like a living thing, trees so tall they swallowed the sky. And yet somehow the air felt thinner. I parked under a patch of moonlight and tried to sleep. That's when I heard it again. Not knocking this time. Whispering, right against the walls of the van, like voices circling, dozens of them, too quiet to make out but not quiet enough to ignore. I shoved in my earplugs, cranked white noise. It didn't help. When I turned off the sound, the voices were inside now, not loud, just closer. I curled up with Jasper, hands shaking. He didn't growl this time. He just stared at the door, pupils wide, frozen. I'd never seen a dog so still, and then it spoke. One voice, not a whisper, right in my ear. "You left them." I sat up so fast, I cracked my head on the cabinet. There was no one in the van, no phone nearby, no speaker, no walkie-talkie, just my breath fogging up the window, and one perfect handprint sliding down the inside of the glass. I didn't sleep. Drove out before sunrise. That was the first time I really considered giving up the van life. Calling my sister, selling the rig, going back to Minnesota, hell, just sleeping on a couch, on a floor, under 100 fluorescent lights in a crowded city where nothing spiritual or supernatural could reach me. But I didn't. Because by then, it wasn't just fear, it was shame. The voice had said, "You left them," and it knew. It knew what I'd done, what I'd refused to admit. The reason I hit the road in the first place wasn't just to see the country. It wasn't freedom. It wasn't adventure. It was escape. 3 years ago, I walked away from someone who needed me. Someone who had begged me to stay. I told myself I couldn't help anymore, that I had to protect myself, that I had to leave the broken places behind. But maybe that brokenness never left me. Maybe it followed me, waited, grew in the cracks I ignored. And now, maybe it had taken shape, and maybe it was calling me back. I avoided the woods after that, stuck to parking lots, truck stops, places where light buzzed and cameras watched every angle. I showered at gyms, ate in chain diners, kept the van locked tight. But the thing about parking lots is, you're alone in a crowd. Everyone's coming and going, but nobody looks at you. Nobody asks if you're okay. And that's when the dreams started. They were vivid. Worse than anything I'd experienced on the road so far. I'd dream of places I hadn't been yet. Cracked pavement, rusting swing sets, RVs that hadn't moved in decades. Always the same layout, always the same silence. Always the same single trailer in the center. Door ajar, curtain moving, like it was waiting for me. Every time I woke up, I felt drained. I don't mean tired, I mean hollow. Like parts of me had stayed behind in the dream, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever get them back. I started recognizing faces in the dreams, people I'd seen at past campgrounds, a kid with a camo hoodie from Colorado, an old man who'd helped me back into a tight spot in Texas, the woman in the Winnebago, all of them in the windows of the center trailer, staring out, expressionless, like they were part of it now. Then one night, I made the mistake of following one of those dreams. I'd woken up in Spokane, but the dream had shown me a place somewhere farther west. I recognized the landscape. Evergreen trees, a dry riverbed, the outline of an old gas station near a turnoff with no name. I told myself I was just curious, that I'd go check it out and leave if it felt weird. But deep down, I think I knew I wouldn't leave. I followed back roads for hours, not even sure what I was looking for, until the road narrowed and turned to gravel. And then I saw it, just like in the dream. A faded sign half swallowed by moss, Cedar Grove RV Park. The entrance was barely visible from the road, just 2 leaning posts and a dirt path so overgrown it looked like a deer trail. But once I turned in, it opened up. An entire campground, dozens of RVs, most of them intact, some ancient, others surprisingly clean. No lights, no motion, no wind. And at the center, that trailer, the same one from the dreams. Door cracked open, curtain twitching. Jasper whimpered and crawled under the bench seat. I should have backed out. I should have turned around, erased that location from my mind, and buried it in a memory I'd never revisit. But I didn't. I parked, got out, and for the first time in months, I walked toward the thing that had been chasing me. The ground felt wrong, like it wasn't soil anymore, like something pulsed beneath it. I stepped lightly, ears ringing, throat dry. The other RVs loomed on both sides, quiet, too still, as if they were watching. As I passed one, I saw something in the window, a man, early 60s, beard, flannel shirt, just standing, looking out, mouth open in a silent scream, frozen. I took a step back. He didn't move, didn't blink. His eyes were glazed over, but alive, alive. Something inside me screamed to run. Instead, I kept walking. When I reached the center trailer, the door opened wider, on its own, no wind, no sound. Just an invitation. Inside, it was dark, but I could feel the heat radiating from it, like a furnace in July. I took one step up, then another, and that's when I smelled it again, stronger than ever. That copper mold rot, burnt iron and mildew, sweet, thick, and ancient. And then I heard my voice from inside. Come on in, you know how this ends. The thing about hearing your own voice come from a place you haven't stepped into yet, it breaks something in your mind. Like your brain knows it's wrong, but can't decide how wrong. So it just stalls, pauses in that moment of disbelief while something inside you spirals. I stood at the threshold of that trailer with my own voice echoing back at me, like it had been waiting there all along, familiar, casual, cruel. Jasper didn't follow. I looked back and saw him under the van, shaking, pressed flat against the gravel. His eyes met mine. And for a second, it felt like he was begging me not to go. But something inside me said I had to. Because this wasn't just about ghosts or cursed campgrounds anymore. This was about me. about what I'd carried, what I'd refused to face. So I stepped inside. The air hit me like a wall, humid, suffocating, metallic. The temperature spiked instantly, like I'd walked into an oven filled with rot. But worse than that was the silence. Inside, it was utterly still. No creaking, no insects, no ambient hum of old appliances, just the sound of my own shallow breath. The trailer was narrow, longer than it looked from outside. Mismatched carpet, wood paneling warped with time, ceiling tiles stained with ancient leaks. It was like every abandoned RV I'd passed on the back roads, but something about it was suspended. Timeless. I walked slowly down the hall, passing a kitchenette frozen in decay, cabinets slightly open, a single spoon in the sink, coffee mug turned upside down like someone had been mid-cleanup, then vanished. Then I passed a mirror, and my reflection didn't move. My breath caught in my throat. I took a step forward. The image didn't. Its head slowly tilted the opposite direction, and then it smiled. I staggered back into the hallway wall, knocking over a plastic broom, which fell with a sound that felt 10 times too loud for the silence in that place. My reflection was gone when I looked back. Just the empty mirror now. No cracks, no dust. Perfect. I didn't call out, didn't dare speak. I just kept moving, feet trembling over the faded carpet toward the closed door at the end of the hall. I already knew what was behind it. I'd seen it in dreams. I'd felt it calling me. But I couldn't stop. My hand touched the doorknob. It was cold, impossibly cold. And then I heard it again. My voice, softer this time, tired. You shouldn't have left me there. I opened the door. It was a small bedroom, barely wide enough to fit the narrow bed, the kind of sad foam mattress you'd find in a forgotten trailer. One window on the far wall, tattered curtain, and on the bed was me. Or someone who looked like me, at least. Same clothes I'd worn when I left Minnesota, same hair, only longer, same scar above the right brow from when I fell off a bike as a kid. He looked up at me. His eyes were glassy, not hollow, full, like he carried everything I'd pushed away. Do you remember now? He asked, voice hoarse. I couldn't speak, like I couldn't move. He sat up, knees creaking like old wood, and then he stood. I stood, walked right up to me, and whispered, "It followed you because it is you." His hand touched my shoulder, and suddenly I saw it all. Every moment I'd buried, every time I'd silenced that internal scream. When my brother called in tears and I told him I couldn't help anymore. When my mother begged me to come home and I turned off my phone. The night I left with the van, pretending it was about freedom, but really it was about escaping guilt I didn't want to feel anymore. I saw myself watching people suffer and choosing not to act, not out of cruelty, out of cowardice, and the entity, whatever it was, had fed on that. The abandoned parks, the dreams, the reflections that didn't match, they weren't haunting me, they were me. The places I passed weren't warnings, they were graves I'd dug for parts of myself. And this trailer, this was where it all lived now. I backed away from the figure, from myself, from all of it. And the trailer began to shift. The walls groaned. The air thickened. I could feel the weight of the memories pressing in, like the space itself was collapsing. I ran. I didn't think. I ran. Back down the hall, past the mirror where I saw dozens of me now. Reflections from every age, from every guilt, all watching, all smiling. I slammed through the front door, gasping in the cold air. Outside, the sky had changed. It was dusk when I'd entered. Now, midday. Cloudless, silent. But the campground was different. The RVs were gone. No rust, no debris. Just a clearing in a field surrounded by perfect trees, not wild forest anymore. Manicured, sterile, like a dream of nature instead of the real thing. Jasper was gone. The van, still there, but clean, pristine, like it hadn't been driven in years, like it had always been waiting here. And in the window, I saw the same face again. Mine, staring back. That's when I lost time. I don't know how long I stood there. When I finally blinked, I was back in the driver's seat. Night again, the van engine off, Jasper curled up next to me, fast asleep. No sign of the trailer, no clearing, no park, just a dirt pull-off near the Columbia River, lights of a distant town flickering over the hills. I checked the timestamp on my phone. 2 hours had passed, and I had no memory of how I got there. It's been 3 weeks since that night. I've been driving south, chasing cities now, chasing noise, movement, things that anchor me to reality. But I still see him. The other me. in reflections, in dreams. Sometimes in the passenger seat when I nod off at rest stops, he doesn't speak anymore, but he watches. And I know what he's waiting for. Another abandoned place, another crack in my armor, another moment of weakness when I think I can run from guilt instead of facing it. Because here's what I've learned out here. The scariest monsters don't hide in forests or lurk in creepy trailers. They wait in the decisions you don't want to remember. And once they know your name, they never stop following. The next few days blurred into one long, restless drive. Every time I stopped, even for gas, I kept my hand near the keys. I didn't trust stillness, didn't trust mirrors, didn't trust myself. I'd see someone in my peripheral vision turn and there'd be no one there. A man in the corner of a diner, a reflection in the windshield, my own voice muttering things I hadn't said. It was like the world had split open behind me and something slipped through, something that fit my shape but not my soul. I told myself it was just lingering fear. After all, I'd been through something traumatic. Maybe I was hallucinating from exhaustion, dehydration, stress, but then I started seeing the trailers again. Not the same one from the woods. Different makes and models, different states, but the same feeling, like they'd been dropped there by something ancient, something that wanted to be seen just long enough to worm its way into your psyche. One of them was tucked behind a rundown drive-in movie screen outside Sacramento. Another was parked beside a broken-down carousel in rural Nevada, surrounded by tumbleweeds and silence. I passed one in Arizona, half buried in red sand, its windows all covered in tinfoil, its tires melted into the earth like it hadn't moved since the 80s. No matter how far I drove, they kept appearing. Always in peripheral spaces, forgotten corners of America, like stains reality had tried to scrub away. And each time I passed one, something in my chest tightened, like a string being pulled tighter and tighter, warning me that whatever I'd awakened, it wasn't finished. Not yet. One night, I pulled off near a desolate rest stop on the edge of the Mojave. It wasn't on any map. There were no signs, no other vehicles. Just a cracked concrete pad, a metal trash barrel, and a busted vending machine humming with static. But I was so damn tired. And something about the place felt not safe, but numb. Like it was between frequencies, between here and wherever he waited. I killed the engine, sat in silence, listened to Jasper's breathing beside me. And that's when I noticed. The stars were gone. The sky above me was black, not cloudy, just absent. Like someone had painted over the night, even the moon was missing. And in that void, I heard the knock, 3 short taps from under the van. My whole body froze. Not again, not here, not him. I reached slowly for the door handle, but before I could move, the knock came again. Only this time it was followed by something worse. A laugh. My laugh. Soft, familiar, twisted. I flung the door open and dropped to the dirt, flashlight in hand. Nothing. No one under the van. No prints in the dust. Just cold desert air and a silence so deep it felt like pressure in my skull. But when I turned around, the van's windows were all fogged up from the inside. I climbed back in, heart pounding. Every window opaque, covered in a thin film of moisture like someone had breathed on the glass from inside while I was gone. I wiped one clear with my sleeve, and there it was, a handprint. Not Jasper's, not mine. Too long, too narrow. It was his. The other me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with the flashlight on my lap, and Jasper curled tight at my feet, both of us listening for any sign the world outside was still real. When the sun finally rose, I drove without direction. No GPS, no map, further into nowhere. But I knew I couldn't run forever. He wasn't just following me anymore. He was inhabiting me. I started having gaps in time. Not full blackouts, but slips. I'd stop at a grocery store and realize I couldn't remember how I'd gotten there. Find receipts in my pocket for things I didn't buy. Photos on my phone I didn't take. Blurry, crooked shots of me asleep in the van, from outside the van. And one night, I woke up standing beside a campfire I didn't build. Matches still in my hand. Jasper nowhere in sight. It was like the line between me and him had blurred. And I began to ask myself a question I couldn't answer. What if I never really left that trailer? What if I'd been him all along? But the final sign came outside a dying mining town in southern Utah. I stopped at a roadside diner with flickering neon, desperate for caffeine and the illusion of normalcy. Inside, it smelled like old grease and dust. A single waitress worked the counter. She didn't ask where I was from or how long I'd been on the road. She just poured me a cup and said, "You're not the first one he's followed." I looked up sharply. "Excuse me?" She didn't blink. "I've seen your face before, or someone wearing it." A pause. "He comes through here every decade or so. Looks like you. Drives something old, always alone, always hunted. Sometimes he makes it out, sometimes he becomes part of the land." I couldn't breathe. "You mean this has happened to others?" She nodded. "He finds people who run from themselves, like hitchhikes their guilt, becomes them, and then they disappear." I stood up, heart racing. "I need to go." She said one last thing before I left. "You'll either bury him in the desert, or you'll end up in the next forgotten trailer someone else stumbles across." That night, I stopped running. No more highways, no more small towns. I pulled off into the Utah canyons, deep into the rock and silence, drove until the dirt road ended, and hiked the last mile on foot, Jasper trailing close behind. I carried only what I needed: a small mirror, a lantern, and a journal filled with every memory I'd spent years trying to bury, because I knew what I had to do. To break the cycle, I couldn't just run from him. I had to confront the parts of me he fed on. I reached a narrow cliffside, laid out the mirror, lit the lantern, opened the journal, and I read, aloud, every failure, every abandonment. Every time I hurt someone and blamed it on circumstance, I spoke until my voice cracked, until I could barely see through the tears. And when I looked in the mirror again, he was there. Not smiling, not mocking, just watching, waiting. And I finally said what he needed to hear. "I remember now, and I'm not afraid of you anymore." He didn't speak. He never did. But I could feel his intent. He wanted to see if I'd flinch, if I'd look away, if I'd deny myself one last time, open the door for him to crawl back in. I didn't. I stared into the mirror, into the hollow of his eyes, my eyes, and whispered the truth that had chased me across thousands of miles. "You are the part of me I never wanted to face." That's when the wind picked up. Not natural wind, no breeze, no rustling of leaves, just pressure, as if the canyon was inhaling. The mirror began to tremble in the dust. The lantern flickered once, twice, then burst, but I didn't move. Jasper was growling low beside me, his ears pinned flat, his body tense like he'd bolt, but he stayed, just like he always had. And then he stepped out of the mirror, not physically, not in flesh, but in presence. It was like seeing every wrong choice I'd ever made stand up and wear skin. His expression wasn't rage or hatred, it was grief. I realized then that he wasn't just some malevolent doppelganger. He was regret, given form. Everything I'd run from, every mistake I'd let fester in silence had built him, fed him. He didn't want to kill me. He wanted me to surrender, to let the guilt eat me from the inside, to become just another hollow shell in a trailer no one remembered. But I said no. I closed the journal. I picked up the mirror and I turned it toward him. "I made you," I said, "but you don't get to make me." The air screamed. No sound, not really. Just pressure, like my bones were rattling inside me. The edges of my vision went white, then red, then nothing at all. I fell to my knees, but I didn't look away. He thrashed, twisted, his reflection bending like smoke in a storm. I saw his face melt into 100 versions of myself, young, old, ashamed, furious, and finally gone. The mirror cracked down the middle, the air stilled, and the canyon exhaled. When I opened my eyes again, dawn was bleeding over the rocks. Jasper was licking my hand, whining softly. I looked around. No mirror, no lantern, just the journal, open to the last page. A single sentence scrawled in handwriting that wasn't mine. "Don't forget again." I didn't drive for a few days. We stayed out there in the desert, me and Jasper, camped under the stars. No radio, no distractions, just space and breath and silence. For the first time in weeks, I slept deeply. Not because I felt safe, but because I no longer felt like a stranger in my own skin. There was a cost to what I'd faced. I'll never fully know what that presence was, or how long it had been passing from person to person, wearing their guilt like a mask. Maybe it was supernatural, maybe psychological, maybe both. But I do know this. Abandoned RV parks, they're not always empty. Some hold echoes of people who lost themselves. Others hold mirrors that don't reflect the truth, but the lie you tell yourself the most. I eventually made my way back to civilization. Got the van checked, repaired what needed fixing. But I kept the cracks in the windshield, a reminder. Not everything that's broken needs replacing. Some things need to be remembered exactly as they are. Now, when I camp, I don't just check the locks or scan the tree line for danger. I check inward, because fear doesn't always knock. Sometimes it rides in the passenger seat. Sometimes it wears your smile in the side mirror. And sometimes, if you're not careful, it takes the wheel and drives you somewhere you can't come back from. If you're hearing this and thinking that would never happen to me, just listen. We all have something we bury. Some forgotten trailer on the edge of our past, filled with rust and silence and things we swore we'd never revisit. But just because you drive away doesn't mean it's gone. Sometimes the only way to escape the haunting is to walk back in, look it in the eye, and name it. Only then can you leave it behind without carrying it with you. There are more stories like mine. People who vanished in places no one maps. Travelers who saw versions of themselves they couldn't explain. Journal entries found in sun-bleached campers. Sketches of impossible faces scratched into diner tables. Not all of them made it out. Not all of them were willing to see themselves for who they really were. But maybe that's why I survived. Not because I was strong, but because I finally stopped pretending I wasn't scared. Because I stopped running and started remembering. So if you're ever out there on the road, if you pull into a lot where no one answers the door, if the grass is too neat, the air too still, the silence too perfect, ask yourself, what part of you haven't you faced yet? Because abandoned RV parks don't just echo with footsteps, they echo with truths. And if you stay too long, yours might echo back. There's a moment, after you've come face to face with something that should have broken you, where the silence feels different. It doesn't feel like emptiness anymore. It feels like space, like room, like breath. I sat on the back bumper of the van that morning, sipping instant coffee that tasted more like burnt dust than caffeine, but I didn't care. The horizon was wide open. The desert was golden with morning light. Jasper snored softly at my feet, no longer tense, no longer afraid. We had survived something no one would believe, and I wasn't sure I'd even try to explain it. Not to my friends, not online, not to strangers at campgrounds. Because the truth is, this wasn't about proving something happened. It was about learning why it happened. For most of my life, I treated fear like a fire escape, a signal to run. When my instincts told me something was off, I'd pack up and leave. When emotions got too heavy, I'd bury them in busy work. When memories surfaced, memories of past mistakes, past versions of myself, I'd distract, deflect, deny. But in that canyon, in that park, no one marked on any map, I learned something I think most people never do. Sometimes fear doesn't come to chase you away. Sometimes it comes to point you back to yourself. I've since visited other strange places. Old mining towns in Colorado where the winds whistle names through collapsed buildings. Fog-choked riverbanks in the Pacific Northwest where whole RVs have gone missing. Even a forgotten mountain pass in West Virginia, where I could have sworn the trees were whispering the same phrase over and over. Remember who you are. But nothing ever hit me quite like that first night at Canyon Creek, because that was the first time I stopped running. The first time I realized I wasn't just being haunted by something out there. I was being haunted by me. I still keep the cracked journal in the glove compartment. The handwriting's faded, the cover warped. But every so often, when I get that feeling in my gut, like something just under the surface is shifting, I open it. I read the last page. And I remind myself, don't forget again. Not because I think the thing I saw will return. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But because forgetting is what made me vulnerable in the first place. Forgetting the pain, forgetting the consequences, forgetting the small voices that said, this doesn't feel right, before I ever set foot in that cursed park. Now I don't wait for fear to explode. I listen for it early, in the creak of floorboards in a closed-up visitor center, in the scent of rain before clouds roll in the silence between my own thoughts when the road gets too long and the night too quiet. People ask me sometimes, would you go back to that place, that moment, that experience? And the answer? Yes, absolutely, yes. Because that's where I finally understood what the road was really for. It's not just about escape. It's about reckoning. It's about finding the pieces of yourself scattered in forgotten places and putting them back together, not as they were, but as they're meant to be. If you're out there listening to this, sitting in a dark camper or watching the trees sway outside your tent, and you've been feeling that slow crawl of something not quite right, lean into it. Don't bolt just yet. Don't drown it out with podcasts or white noise or scrolling your phone until sunrise. Just sit, breathe, and ask yourself, what am I running from? Because sometimes the scariest thing in an abandoned RV park isn't a ghost or a creature or a shadow at the window. Sometimes it's a reflection you're not ready to see. I still remember the first time I really cried after all that. It wasn't during the haunting. It wasn't even when I left. It was a week later in a laundromat in Flagstaff, of all places. I was folding a clean t-shirt, and suddenly the smell of the desert, the silence of that canyon, the weight of what I'd seen, it all came crashing in like a wave I didn't know was still following me. And I wept, right there on a cracked plastic chair between two humming dryers, not out of fear, but out of release, because I realized I made it back, not just physically, but fully. I was no longer haunted. I was aware, and that changes everything. If there's anything I'd leave you with, it's this. There are abandoned places inside all of us. Parks we stopped visiting because the memories hurt too much. Roads we won't drive again because of what we left behind. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is turn down that unmarked dirt road, face the silence, sit in the stillness, and listen for the voice that's been trying to reach you, not to terrify, not to punish, but to bring you home. So go ahead, map your route, charge your batteries, fill the tank, but don't just prepare for the beauty. Prepare for the reflection, because out there, beyond the cell service and the welcome centers and the picnic tables, are places that remember you better than you remember yourself. Places that whisper when the wind picks up. Places that crack open something inside you and make you ask, what do I need to face before I can be free? Don't be afraid to find out, because on the other side of fear is truth. And on the other side of truth is peace.